Not for Carolyn.
Oh,
It was Carolyn.
Carolyn, yeah.
You're getting kudos, Carolyn.
Nice job, Carolyn.
It's not often people remember to put an accommodation statement on things from the beginning, so thank you.
Good morning, commissioners. Welcome back to Sacramento. Welcome to summer. I understand that we are in for some warmth and sun while we are here, for those of you that are not normally based here. I'm excited. So welcome, Dr. Sandoval. Nice to see you. Matt, Stacy, Venetia, thank you for your work on putting this together. I know that this is not an easy meeting to wrangle all the pieces, so thank you for your work. And we didn't have a lot of time either between the last meeting and now, so it was an expedited process, so thank you. All right, well, let's start with the roll call. Venetia, would you like to take roll?
Michelle Andrus.
Here.
Mildred Brown. Summer Harding. Havanya Hayes White.
Here.
Sarah Jockum. Betty Carnett. Christina Mills.
Here.
Gloria Perez Stewart. Lester Pinku. Gina Plate.
Here.
Keila Rodriguez.
Here.
Kimberly Solomonson.
Here.
Mariano Sanz. Barbara Schulman.
Here.
Steve Winlock. Leanne Liebus.
Here. Fantastic, thank you. All right, Kayla, would you like to lead us in the flag salute?
Sure. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Sure.
All right, let's see. Barbara, would you like to review the agenda for us?
Sure. Nice to be back, everybody. Please remember that we don't use acronyms. If you're speaking, could you please use all the terms instead of IEP, say Individualized Education Plan. It helps people who are in the audience and helps people who are here. I was just in a meeting already this morning where I didn't understand one set of letters, and they were going by so fast, so I really understood why it's important to us. We're going to have item one is transition programs, and our own Commissioner Kimberly is going to be speaking. We're going to have a talk about ESEA by Barbara Murchison. We're going to have the Mental Health Subcommittee ad hoc committee speaking, lunch, and then we're going to have a small group discussion regarding our ACSE priorities and legislative review. You've all got some of that information, and hope everybody read it and took information on it. That's part of what we do, is do our homework so that we're ready to work when we come here. Then we'll have more small group sessions if needed, and then an update on the governor's May budget revise and liaison reports, and then general public comment. I think there might have been a change for general public comment.
Yes, so thank you, Barbara. I have to apologize. So in our various iterations of the agenda, one of our items that we always have as a standing item, our FEC and PTI update, was left off. So I want to extend an apology. And we are going to use a special ed word, bifurcate or split our general public comment time and move it up. So we'll have a morning general public comment opportunity after item one, and then we'll keep our general public comment item at the end of the day. And so for those folks that are here from the FEC and PTI, please accept my apologies. And we'd love to have you talk right after item number one. Thank you, Barbara. Okay, well, with that, any announcements, anything that we should know about from commissioners before we get started? I do want to, we have some folks missing, and Lester and Betty both reached out to let me know that they would not be here, and I promised for both of them, if juvenile justice came up or if special ed funding came up, we would ensure that somebody voiced their input or acted on behalf of the two of them. And then Gloria had a family emergency, and she may join us, but is joining us via webcast, I believe. And then Steve will be here later, and then Mariano is not able to join us, and Sarah is not able to join us. So I know that this is a really challenging time of year. The June meeting and the August meeting are always a challenge. So those of you that are here, I know that we are in your summer break for some of you. So I really do thank you for being here. Thank you for your time. Many of you are engaged in activities other than just attending the meeting. So thank you for those of you that have been involved in agenda planning discussions, that are involved in some sort of work group related to your role on the commission. I want to thank you for that, and we'll hear more about those during our liaison updates. Any announcements? Anything else before we dive into item number 1? Matt.
Just there's a sign-up sheet for the special education listserv back on the back table.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Thank you. And any other housekeeping items? I'll look to the three of you before we jump in. We're good to go. Okay. Well, with that, let's dive into item number 1, which, as Barbara said, Kimberly Salamonson. So close.
That's why I
I'm
didn't say
so-
it.
Salmonson. Salmonson. It does. Thank you.
That's why I said Commissioner Kimberly.
That's well, thank you for helping me. But as you're making your way to the podium, Kimberly is the Director of Pupil Personnel Services in Sanger Unified. And as a new commissioner, we invited Kimberly to talk about the transition programs that are taking place, or she's setting up in Sanger. And as you know, Barbara is our lead expert on transition programs, so I know that she's going to have some questions as well. So welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you. And Barbara, you challenged me not to speak in acronyms, so please call me out because that is just so hard not to do. It's almost part of our training. I think I'm on. Well, first, Commission, thank you for inviting me to speak on this topic. It's something that is near and dear to my heart because there's been so much recent work that the district has done in this area, and we are really proud of where we're headed. We know there's a lot of work left to do, but to be able to celebrate what is happening right now is really a gift. I want to start, I can see an acronym right there, first slide. Adult Transition Program is really something that I think we have looked at as a space of 4 years. We've really talked about it in the context of 18 to 22. And it has, I think, in a way limited us in our scope of really thinking broadly enough about students of that age and what it is that they're doing and preparing for. We tend to, in public education, think at 22, we're done, and that somehow we have prepared them for the rest of their life. And I think really we need to think about it as a stepping stone into a lifetime of learning. None of us are the same, at least I hope I'm not, as I was at 22. I'm much smarter, I'm much more mature. I've made a bunch of different decisions about my life that maybe didn't look the same as what I was thinking I was going to be doing at 22. And so I hope that we're building skills for our students to not only leave with skills to join their life at 23 plus, but to continue growing and changing as we all are. I would be remiss if I didn't thank first my district for letting me be as creative as I have been, and to put around me an amazing team who supports all of our ideas and really takes some of these crazy ideas that I might come up with, and they make them better than what I could have ever dreamed possible. So as I'm talking through ATP programming, adult transition programming, I really want to kind of give a shout out to two groups of people. First, my team, Autumn Wolf and Haley Field and Wayne and Sandy Richardson, no relation, Ashley Price and Zach Smith. And then I also want to thank who I'll call my 3 musketeers. I really didn't ask them for permission to use their name, but I asked 3 parents to kind of go on this journey with us. And I really asked them to do something that to be honest, I think might have been unfair. But I asked them to be as objective as they could possibly be, looking at the programming that we had through the needs of their children, other children, and what we really thought we could accomplish in a year's time. And I think that's a big ask, to ask parents to be objective about their children. I don't know that I would have had the ability to do that about my own. And they were amazing, and they did amazing work. And it was through their voice that some of this program change came about. So I would like to thank my 3 musketeers. They know who they are. So when we started to talk about adult transition programming, we realized that we needed some visual about what we thought the context of these students' learning was going to look like. And we settled on 4 areas: learning, working, living, and playing. That is what 18 to 22-year-old individuals do. And then we started to build out from that interagency development, community development, learning opportunities, work opportunities, and connections that we felt would be able to give a more robust environment for our students. We knew we could not do that as a district by ourselves. And so I provided that second slide on the second page as a full page so you could see some of the work that's being done. I'll talk about each one of them individually as we move through the presentation. But in our learning environment, we have great collaborations with junior college, Reedley College, and a 4-year university, Fresno State. We also have partnerships with Bitwise. And Bitwise is an innovative company in Fresno who is looking at technology and really building that out and looking for startups. And they have been wonderful about offering our students the ability to come in and learn things like coding, how to access and navigate media and social media, and they are willing to modify and create access for our students within that building. And the building is just the coolest thing you've ever seen. It's something you would expect to see in a really big tech industry in a big city. And you walk in there and it's accessible and kids can navigate it, and they're willing to work with us on building classes for our students to take. So we thank them. In our work environment, we have agreements with several businesses, and we really started to outside in the Fresno area. So Sanger is about 15 miles east of Fresno, which is certainly a much bigger city. And we're a small rural community. And so we really wanted connections to the outside. We knew our community would support us, and they have been phenomenal. But we also wanted our students to have access and connections to a greater community, because often I think our parents want to protect, and the community is very small, and we've grown up in that community, and it's a very safe feeling. But we wanted our students to have options and opportunities really outside of that circle of influence that they had had through their preschool to grade 12. So we have some great connections, and I'll talk about those a little bit later. I'm going to jump a little bit to Plain. We have recently brought Best Buddies into the Central Valley, so that's very exciting. We have a really robust Special Olympics program, and we ran an integrated program this year where all of our teams had general education students and students with disabilities that worked together as part of teams. And we're working hard with our community on involvement, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The living part is one of the most exciting things. So I'm going to leave that as just a tantalizing bit of information that we'll talk about in a couple of pages. So if we start looking, and I think I need to be doing this. There we go. If we start with our target program, that's okay, that works. We see that the target program, if I look at the whole adult transition program that we have, really our only program that we held on to in Sanger Unified and that we ran was our target program at Fresno State. And that program was for students who had a lot of independence and who were able to navigate that huge campus pretty much on their own after about a month of intensive support. And it serves about 15 to 20 students. That, of course, changes every year. We modify all academic coursework that they might take there. They have an access to a variety of work experiences on that campus, and we have great support from the rehab counseling department, the school psych department, school counseling department, and special education teacher training department, so that students who need intern or practicum time will come and work with our students on campus and support our students in accessing classes, work experience, and just navigating the social scene on a university campus. Dean Paul Berry and Colleen Torgerson in the Kremen Education Building have been phenomenal. This year, we had a big dinner at my house. We had all the deans of the departments we work with over, and we're sitting there talking, and Paul looks over and goes, "Why don't the Target kids graduate, on stage with everyone else?" That's a great question, and it was so moving because it was coming from somebody who isn't in special education world, and here through that 6-8 year relationship was starting to ask access questions and wanting to engage and include, and this year we had students, and our program was in the catalog, it was in the announcement, and our students walked in cap and gowns and were introduced on stage and were part of the Greater Kremen Building graduation. And that was just, I cried the entire time like a huge baby, I have to be honest. So I really recommend no makeup on those days. But we've been blessed with relationships. It took us a while to develop those. I'm not going to say that was an easy process. They were very welcoming, but there's a lot of red tape at the university level. And I encourage each and every one of you, because I really do think that this is replicable, and I'm sure we're not the first. I'm just talking about what we're doing. But I tease my team and I say, ask questions like a 2-year-old. I said, if you don't say why 10 times, we're not digging deep enough, because if you say why 10 times, most often you finally get to the point where you realize it's just the way it's always been done. There's really no law that drives it. There's really no rule in writing that drives it. It's just the way it's been done. And when you can get to the root of that, that's when everybody goes, oh, we can change that. We can work with you and we can change some of those access points. And so we have worked for 8 years to build those relationships with different departments and showcase what our students can do and what they are able to learn to do. An example of a class that we take at Fresno State is University 1. And we work with that professor, and we work to modify curriculum to make it accessible. But otherwise, our students participate in every activity, every test, every presentation, and they do it in their own way, in the way that they can access and in the way they can demonstrate their knowledge. Campus involvement that we have is probably across 10 or 12 different areas. I named as many as I could think of off the top of my head, and I've got a short video. Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, I thought you were.
I do. I had a question.
Yes.
When they walk across the stage,
Mhm.
what is it that they are leaving with? Are they leaving with a certificate? Or is that something you're going to address later? And I'm just jumping ahead.
That is something I want. It is not something they have right now. They are leaving with a certificate of completion of our program that is at Fresno State.
I see.
What I want is the ability to actually access and earn our credits and work towards something that has a name and that shows the skill set that they have learned. Whether I have to build that myself within that program, or whether we partnership with Fresno State to build that, is work that is kind of the next step for us. So yes, great question. So our students are on horticulture, library, their work experience, the child care center, I better put on my glasses, landscape department, security we're working on because we have a student who wants to be a police officer, so we're going to try to work with our security department and see what kind of experience we can get. The Student Union, the Equine Center, they love the horses. Chef's Kitchen, and Friday they are part of a bowling league. So we have a social component where they get to interact on a just purely social level with students at Fresno State. So if you will indulge me a little bit, and I'm hoping that this works. Okay. Next slide. Am I doing the right one?
Kimberly, can you take a question while Matt is setting that up? Thank you.
So it says that you have about 15 to 20 students. How do those students get selected?
It's really based on the pillar of safety and independence and access to a college level program. And that is one of the things that we're trying to change with the new ATP programming schematic that we're going to have, which will be much more fluid. And once I kind of have all the programs described, I'll talk about how our students will move in and out of there within those 4 years. Because before, that's a great question, when you left high school, you kind of got assigned a program based on where you were at that time. And there wasn't a lot of fluidity or movement for that 4 years. You kind of went into program and you graduated from that program. Where we know that as our students are growing and maturing and interests are changing through that time, most of us had a change of
Yeah.
degree or two in college. We realized that they have some interests that are very different at certain periods of time. So we're hoping to create some more fluidity where they can go in and out of college programs and in and out of work experience programs, so that we can meet their needs ongoing. Let me see. Are we? You sure, Barbara? I can take the question. Okay.
I just wanted to make sure everything's okay for the video.
I think we're good.
Hang on, let's see here.
This is just a short little video. It kind of shows our kids. They're just still pictures, but shows our kids in the environment that we've described.
Oh, PowerPoint. Hang on a second.
Okay.
It's not happy right now.
That's okay.
Sorry, we have and this is the one right here. Is the movie the last
Right
part
here.
of the slide? Right there, okay. Hang on a second here. We should be able to get a full screen. Huh. Hang on a second here.
Do your students get high school diplomas before going to this college? Do they get certificates of completion? Can they go in at 17? So I've got lots of questions.
It's okay. Yes, when they leave high school, this is programming that is available when they leave high school, and they leave with certificates of completion. So all the programming that I'm describing right now are for students who have left high school without diplomas.
That was an important question. Thank you.
I'm sure, hey,
It's okay.
so this is slide 5, right? Or it's number 5, item 5. Boy.
I'm going to take all 45 minutes, Gina. At the bottom, will it allow, if I scroll down to the bottom?
It should be, but hang on a second. See, this will do that right here.
Can I ask her a question? Is that all
Yeah, go ahead, Michelle.
right?
Talk amongst yourselves.
Okay. Can you just go into a little more detail about how the different support providers actually offer support? So you have rehab counselors, school psych interns, school counseling interns, good use of interns, by the way, but curious like what that might look like for a typical student in the program.
So a student who may be a rehab counseling student will come in. We have a teacher on site and 2 paraprofessionals that travel with our program to Fresno State, and they will sign up. Our teacher of record also teaches some of the rehab counseling strands, and so the students that she has in that strand who are needing intern hours will be assigned to one of our students. And so they will work with them periodically, have scheduled times throughout the week. They can go and have social time, they can go have lunch together, they can do whatever they want. But a lot of times what they're working on are homework assignments or things that the students are working on in class and trying to get completed. And so they'll sit and work with them on those kinds of items, or they might decide to go bowling, or they might decide to go have lunch first. So really almost like a study group environment. We've really tried to just give options for them to interact with our students in a really natural, collegiate way. Doesn't want to go? That's okay.
No, it's not good.
That's all right. We can live without it.
Are you sure?
Sure. I mean, I hate
Let me try something else. Just give me a brief look.
No worries.
Kimberly, I have another question.
I'm a troubleshooter, so just give me a
That's great.
can't stand it. You can do it.
So one of the things, as we talk about UDL and MTSS, and we're talking about inclusive settings, one of the things that has come up in transition-related discussions is, to what end are these interventions or are these discussions taking place? What is it that we are working towards? And it's interesting to have these discussions now and see what are the linkages between a program and the world. And so I'm anticipating that maybe in your presentation, or maybe you could talk at some point about after they walk across that stage and they're 22 or they're about to be 23, what does that linkage look like? And is that something that is guiding their discussion the whole way through the program?
It is guiding their discussion the whole way through the program. So when we leave that 12th grade setting, there's been a transition plan written, and what we are trying to focus on is that should be a living, breathing document all the way through the next 4 years, instead of something that is done in 12th grade and then it drives 4 years of programming and you really can't get out of that track once you're there. You're kind of stuck. The goal for me, and I think as a district and as a program, is that our students leaving at 22 have secured a future they've envisioned and been part of designing for the last 4 years, and that those options and opportunities are as diverse and unique as the students that are there. I just would challenge our team at the school to say, pick me, 15 to 20 other students at this age and tell me what they're doing. And that's what really drove the 4 areas that we were trying to give them access to. And it really drives the discussion about, at 22, what happens? Because we will have some students who have decided and who have the skill set and have the connection with an outside employer for a job. We have some students who still have learning to do. And what does that look like with our outside agencies, and how are we connecting them to make sure that continued learning takes place?
Right.
And if we have had, and we have had on occasion, families who have said, thanks but no thanks, but they'll be at home with us. Are they living the most independent life that they can within that setting? Because I have to honor and respect that as well.
Sure.
I think that that's not only a student decision, but we have a family involved in that decision as well. So really sitting down and having those conversations and letting the student drive the decision about where they want to be in 4 years, and making sure that we've opened the doors so that whatever they've decided they want to do, we've given them the best foothold in order to do that.
Thank you.
Well, so we don't have a video, and that's okay. It really showcased just still photos of our kids involved in the work I've described at Fresno State. And it had great music, and it was kind of fun. So that's okay. What I'll try to do is,
We're envisioning.
are you right there with me, Barbara? I'll send it to you guys, and you can get teary privately. I didn't even know if I wanted to show it because I cry every single time, no matter how many times I watch it, and that would have been kind of a mess. So in looking at that full page that I gave you on that second page, in really trying to design what we thought would give kids the greatest access, we realized a lot of our students come, as most 18 to 22-year-olds do, with some skills of independent living. But I'll tell you what, if my son's at home, I'm doing his laundry. I can't help myself. If they come home, I'm feeding them, I'm taking care of them, and they just become sloths. I don't understand what happens. I think it happens with myself. I go home, my dad starts taking care of me. I don't know what happens, but we notice that our students kind of do the same thing. And they're going to spend a lot of time in their home with their families for the rest of their lives, some of them. And we want them to be able to navigate that environment as well as independently as possible. So, I went to Cabinet a couple years ago, and I said, I want to buy a house. And everybody went, "Oh, okay, what are you going to buy a house for?" And I told them what I wanted to buy a house for, and they said, "That sounds interesting. So how are we going to pay for that?" And I said, "Well, I've been squirreling away some mom money, and I know we've got some unduplicated students in some programs. I think I can get some, LCAP money, and then I think we've got some money in the bank account. So I just want some of it." And, surprisingly, they said, "Okay, figure it out. Let's see what we can do." And we broke ground in December, and it is going to be done in August, and I am thrilled. So it took us,
Go ahead and keep talking.
okay, it took us some time to really envision what we thought this could be. So this will be a home not that they live in, but that they learn how to live differently in a home environment. So we'll see how it turns out. To tell you the truth, that the team has made it something even bigger and better than I could have even envisioned. So our goal with this home is that each room will be sponsored by a corporation or business. We want partnership with them because we want their presence in our home.
Got a movie for you. I think.
Okay.
Let's see.
Can we take a break? Yeah. Okay, we'll go back a little bit. Like, that is a real I have to talk about the guy in the pink shirt, Dr. Klaus Tinbergen, who through the Chef's Academy, he was the head chef there. And you know, he was a cantankerous chef. Yeah, I think it's just in their blood. And we went to him and said, we want our kids to be part of this and be able to take your class. And I wish I could mimic his German accent, because he said they need chef's coats. And I said, okay. And they need hairnets. And I said, okay. And they need to have knife skills. And I said, you're going to have to teach him that. And he was a little tentative at first. And he fell in love with our students and just created something that, again, we would never have envisioned ourselves. So taking our kids and shopping and making, you know, bananas Foster for our board meetings and lighting things on fire in rooms we weren't supposed to light fire but just really took it upon himself to create access. So anyways, so we got to watch the video. So River Rock House, each of the rooms will be sponsored. Our kitchen is a kitchen, our dining room is a dining room, and our living room is a living room, but that's where that stops. The other rooms are going to be set up in skill development areas. So we will have an arts and crafts room, we will have a music, or at crafts and sewing, we will have a music and art room. We will have docent volunteers that will come in to teach our students how to play instruments, how to paint if they want to paint and do artwork, how to mend clothes and how to create something from a pattern. How to, our garage is a 3-car garage. We will have one side of it which will be a gym. So we will do health and nutrition. And the other side will be woodworking and building. We have an agreement with a friend of a friend of a friend who builds rock mailboxes and has said, I will bring all of our extra materials over and we will build that as a fundraiser. So the students that will be one of their first projects, is building stone or doing masonry work around making mailboxes. Our backyard is being sponsored with the Fresno State Horticulture Department and our relationship with Calliope Korea, who runs that program there. So we will build raised beds and we will have farm to table so that our students will grow what they cook and what they share. I think an important part of this home is not just that our students are there, but our community comes to our students, that they see them in a light where they are showing their skill and knowledge with the community member. So we are going to partner through one of our nurses who is a diabetic care specialist. And it's unfortunate, but we have a high percentage of students with students and families with diabetes. And so we are going to talk about food replacement and nutrition, and our students will get to be the sous chefs and will be able to cook from what they've grown, and will be able to share with our community members while they're being educated on diabetic care or a new diabetes diagnosis on how to care for themselves and their families. So not only not only growing to cook, but growing to cook with a purpose. So you can kind of see our vision for what those rooms will look like. Our master bedroom will be our learning center model. We have verbal agreements with 2 different banks. We want our students who are receiving SSI to have control over at least some of their money. We are well aware in a town with a lot of poverty that some of our families, that is part of how they survive, is with those benefits. We want to be sensitive to that, but we want our students to have knowledge of what is coming to that family in their name, and a voice into how that is spent and how that is saved for them. So we are going to be working with a couple of banks that will come in and work with them on opening up accounts and how to manage money through our excursions outside of our day at the home. And then our wood shop and gym. Our house is not a placement. So students do not spend 5 days a week there. That was one thing that we really wanted to change about our adult transition programming, is that our students were going to Fresno State 5 days a week. And no 18 to 22-year-old, I hope, spends 5 days a week on a university campus. So we really wanted to embody, and that's why we defined on that second page, what are those 4 areas and how are we navigating that during the week for them? So our students will have access to the home, they will have access to university, and they will have access to not only on-campus but off-campus work experience, so that we will have that home, work, learn, play model that I think will grow to robustness. Right now, it's a vision, but like I said, I've just been impressed. I've been impressed with our community members. We have not had a no yet. Everywhere we walk into, at first they're like, well, what is that? Who are they? What are you trying to do? And we sit and we describe what that is. We have a great letter. We have a great little URL and a video in the letter. So it gets to be really interactive and fun, and they fall in love in 5 minutes. And they're like, what can we do? Here's some entry-level positions. Well, they could do this and this and this and this, and there's 4 or 5 things in their business that we wouldn't have even thought about. So we're really thrilled that that will be an opportunity. Reedley College is our third option, and it will have a smaller number of students. It's starting this year, so we're excited to start growing it. Again, modified academic coursework. However, we dug around and found that there's a CTE pathway for students with disabilities at Reedley College, and we're like, what is this, and why have we not known about it? So I have to be honest. I know a bit about it. I don't know all about it. And strangely, it's not out there in a really big way. So we're going to do some digging. They are absolutely on board with us and giving us access. In fact, we've got our kids signed up with 2 classes already on campus. So we're going to find a way to get our hands on that certificate. And again, it'll be supported by paraeducators and student volunteers and program-driven student volunteers on campus. So we are pretty excited about that as well. The vision is that our students will be able to navigate all of those options at different parts or points of that 4-year time frame. So no longer are you a Reedley program student, are you a Target student program, but you are just an adult transition program student. And how are your interests changing? How are you maturing your way through that 4 years? And what is it that you want to leave with? And which one of these programs or access points will best meet your needs to get there? So that is our goal. Any questions for yes, Kayla?
Yes, Kayla and then Havanya.
So you mentioned in Reedley you have the CTE pathway.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason why it's not on the Fresno State program?
I just don't know if they've really ever thought about that. So knowing it exists here, we're really excited just to have a blueprint with which to navigate a conversation. Because I don't think they'll say no. I think it's just going to be a matter of saying how.
Right. You mentioned the credit, how they can attain some sort of certificate of something. And you mentioned the house. All of that I would assume it could be embedded and see how they can get the CTE credits to get some sort of certificate.
And our assessment of them accessing those skills and reaching proficiency level, I think we really want to be able to embed that into something that can leave with them and go into a department of rehab conversation or into an employer conversation as a resume, as a working resume. This is what I've had. This is the community collaboration I've had around that. So a community collaboration allows for us to ask for letters of recommendation. It allows for us for community collaboration to say, this is a student I could employ. I've seen it here when I've gone out as a docent to this program, and I've seen their skill set improve. So I see an entry-level position that I can interview and hire them for within my own company, which is our hope. Yeah. Yes.
So I was looking at the different pathways at Reedley, and you were talking about a pathway, a CTE pathway for students with disabilities. Is it something that's embedded in the other pathways for certification?
It's not on there. You're not going to find it, and that's why I don't think we knew about it. When we talked with them, we asked, is this a student with disabilities pathway?
Because I think the hope is that we don't have any student with disabilities pathways.
Right.
That we have pathways that have access points for students with disabilities.
Yeah.
So I'll be curious to hear
I'm curious to hear how we access and how is it accessible for all? Is it specifically for only students with disabilities, or is it not? I think it's called something, but our kids have not had typically had access to that. So I'm thinking it's got to be something that's available for all, and I'm not exactly sure how we're going to navigate that and what that's going to look like. So I would agree that it is something that I don't know how they're defining it, and the access point really should be for all, and it would be great if everybody could participate in whatever their interest is. Yeah.
Havania?
Hi, Kimberly. I enjoyed watching your video. I have 2 questions regarding the River Rock House. What type of teachers will be instructing in those various rooms? And how far is the house from the school? Do the kids walk there, or do they use public transportation?
Yeah. No, the house is actually in town. I'm in Sanger. It's a new Lennar build there right next to an elementary school that we have. So they are within walking distance of our small town, which is easy to navigate. But we will use public transportation and district-provided transportation for all work experience. So if we can get them to be on public transport and there's a way to navigate that because we're so far away from Fresno, we will, because that's a great skill building and independence building activity. But if not, we provide the transportation. Yeah. So my next cabinet conversation is a van. Heads up.
So are there education specialists?
We have an education specialist, 2 paraeducators, and then as the students come to the program along with that group, if they are coming from Fresno State or coming from Reedley, will come a teacher and 2 paras as well. So there are at any point in time, usually 3 to about 5 adults trained in the home. And then our docents will come and collaborate with them using their skill set to teach. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Barbara?
Okay, my transportation was my big question, so you beat me to it. Can they go and take computers at one college and car building at another college, so they can go to, they don't have to choose one college versus the other?
No.
So one day a week they could go to one college, one day a week another college?
Well, we're trying to do
days-
it by semester. We're trying to do it by semester.
by
because
semester.
We're enrolling them, and we pay a modified tuition to each college, to each university. So we're trying to do it we're trying to at least design what their week might look like by semester. Just like any other student who would be attending college, you sign up for semester courses, you have a job for a semester, and then it might change for the following semester.
Right.
Yeah, and I think that will make it doable for us as far as just putting all of the support systems and transportation in place in order to make that.
I was just asking because we had students who went to 2 different colleges because they wanted 2 different things, and they worked 2 days a week. They went to college 2 days a week, and so I was just curious if that was. And anywhere in there, do you have anything about Uber or Lyft that you're teaching them? Because we live in Orange County, and our kids, that's really how they're all getting around now. They used to go on buses everywhere during the day, but the buses don't run at night.
Right.
So one of the things that we realized we had to add to our system was how to do that, and so it was just a suggestion.
Yeah, Uber and Lyft is a great suggestion. It's kind of on our parking lot, no pun intended. It's in our parking lot because our parents their eyes got about this big when we talked about a car pulling up and them getting in a car with an unknown individual, and we just don't live in it. I think it's because of the rural nature of where we live that is something that is, it is used, of course it's there, but it's not like a big city where there's taxis and all that kind of stuff where maybe families are used to engaging. So that's going to be something for us to navigate in conversation with our parents to see if we can do that. But yes, that has come up because we are going to get to a place transportation wise where it's going to be difficult to transport to all the different things that they want to do, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
These are just some of our work experience partners. So we walked in, and within a week, we had almost all of these committed.
Wow.
They were so excited. So Quesadilla Gorilla, Ampersand Ice Cream, Lana Coffee, Bitwise Industries, and then locally Carl's Jr., Walgreens, and ADCO. And we have a whole entire list since I've done this presentation that are coming on board locally. The previous list were in Fresno, in the greater Fresno area, and as well as neighborhood thrift, who I don't have on here. I don't want to be remiss. But a lot of entry points for our students, and then really the commitment that as our students grow and their interests grow, that they are able to navigate different job experiences within Quesadilla Grillas. They said, well, let's start with what they're interested in doing. And one of the things, we have a student who loves to clean. I'm like, but I want her to do something more than just clean, but that is what she is passionate about. So they said, well, we can start with that. And they said, but then we have to do prep, and prep can get kind of messy. And so maybe we can combine prep with cleaning. And I'm like, oh, brilliant. And so, she will fill all of the bins and prep with all of the quesadilla components, but there will also be a cleaning component. So we're kind of ghosting a skill set in there that we hope she doesn't notice we're trying to teach her. But I think that'll be something that just is another step for her.
Nice.
So they had great ideas.
Nice.
Yeah. So, yeah. Our Special Olympics, we talked a little bit about that. Best Buddies, we have the friendship component. We're really pushing to open up an ambassador chapter and the jobs component as well, which will be another partner in creating job opportunities for our students. And that is where we are at.
Very nice. I really appreciate you bringing that program, and it is definitely a conversation that's happening and everywhere. And I think what you've already, with the house, that's a piece, the way that you're utilizing that is really innovative. So I would imagine that folks are going to come to you with more questions about as that evolves. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Yes.
Other questions, commissioners? Yes, Leanne.
You mentioned about a modified tuition. Can you please explain that?
Because our students aren't earning credits, which again is kind of on our short list of things to try and obtain, we do pay a modified tuition for seats in the class. Both colleges are very impacted. So in order for us to obtain ID numbers for that class and for our students to be students at that college, we have to be able to pay some sort of tuition in order to capture seats in the classes that our students want to take. What has been difficult is just navigating the requirements for the course, because we have had to modify them so much for our students. They're not in a place where they can accept them for credit, and that is just a larger conversation. So anyone who has experience with that conversation, I'd love to talk with you, because I think that's kind of our next step, is saying that even though we're paying a modified tuition, how do we create a paper trail showing our students completed these courses?
Fantastic. Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah. Excellent. I knew there were people on this panel that could help me. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you, Kimberly. Right on schedule. So I would like to take a public comment first. If there's any, Venetia, do we have any public comments on this item? And then, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to split the general public comment. And again, this is for procedural purposes to make sure that we're compliant. And I'd like to open it up to general public comment and welcome any general public comment folks, including the folks from PTI and FEC, to the podium.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning. Do you want me to go first? Okay, so I'm here on behalf of the Family Empowerment Centers in California, and we gathered input from about 6 of the centers that wanted to provide some input here to the advisory committee. So starting, and you'll see some common threads. I was looking through it. One of them is preschool LRE timely assessments that are provided in advance, with a few other things going on. So in the Family Soup, Yuba Sutter, Colusa area, they're experiencing an increase in parents wanting full inclusion for preschool and kindergarten, and wanting their children out of special day classes, I almost said SDCs, related to safety concerns and lack of progress. And also in Yuba City specific, they have a family that's having some difficulty getting a independent education evaluation from the charter school. And so they've put that family in touch with the focused monitoring folks here at CDE and are hoping that's going to be helpful. In Orange County, they said that bullying is hugely on the rise and that in light of Assembly Bill 1455, they're not providing those access to counseling and things like that for students who have been bullied. And so they're working to advocate that they, do something meaningful about the bullying issue there. In Fresno and Kings, Exceptional Parents Unlimited, shortage of speech therapists. Parents are actually being denied speech therapy for their children. They're needing to advocate that it be on the IEP. The parents are receiving letters that there's a dollar cap on speech therapy services and they don't cover the cost of those services and that parents are being asked to submit justification. Rates then depend on the district. I don't know much about this issue, but it's happening in that area. Parents are having to go through due process just to receive the need for the services. In Imperial San Diego, Exceptional Parents Unlimited, they're exceeding timelines for assessments when they're moving from into preschool settings from early start. A lack of inclusive opportunities and placement options, and disparity in suspension for students with disabilities. Some special day classrooms have a combined class of ages 6 to 10, like a K through 5. Also seeing that in Orange County, not provided, and she said not providing a typical classroom setting for some children. In San Francisco, they mentioned the issues with paraprofessionals, and mostly in the conversation, it sounded like they were talking about one-on-one aids for children. And they said they are moving towards consolidating those paraprofessionals from school to school. It's created some issues of continuity with families. It means less paraprofessionals. And my guess when I think that all the way through is that there's a shortage of a lot of things like speech therapists and other things where paraprofessionals are being used. And so you can imagine that there's going to be a shortage since they are taking up a lot of those things. In our communities, Butte, Glen, Shasta, Siskiyou, Tehama, and Trinity County, we were finding some things about moving children to community day classes before they'd provided any behavior interventions, and the child may not even necessarily be on an IEP, but they're moved into a more restricted environment. So we're advocating that they continue to use, positive behavior intervention plans prior to those kinds of things and develop IEPs when necessary. On a positive note, we're working with, we actually have MOUs with 2 of our SELPAs, Butte and Shasta, to work with them on some ADR issues. And then our Tehama County SELPA contacted us and we're in discussions about how we might work with them as well. So those are really positive notes for in our neck of the woods. I guess that's about.
Ms. Lawrence, I have a question. You covered, I think, the whole state in that feedback, so thank you for bringing that. That's valuable information. Does that information come to you via a survey or parents talking to the FEC or PTI staff? And then to you, can you tell me what that pathway of that information getting here looks like?
Sure. And I'm here on behalf of the FEC, so Sid will be talking on behalf of the PTI.
Thank you.
For the FECs, this is information that parents have brought forward to their parent consultants, their parent, whatever their parent people are called. In our agency, they're parent consultants. And so when there's more than 1 or 2 cases, generally speaking, they'll bring forth that this seems to be an issue in our area of the state. So, and unfortunately, I have to say, because there aren't FECs all over, I haven't really brought forward yet all the way across the state, but I got a good snapshot of it from the 6 FECs that did come together. And it's a conversation on a phone call with our FEDC folks. So we talk it through. And of course I sent, because I knew I was coming today, we all have our assigned, you know, we all volunteer on different, you know, what meetings we're going to take. I send out a little feeler ahead of time and say, you know, please start talking about what issues you might want to bring up for the ACSE. And then on the call we had last week, people brought even more to the table. So,
Oh, that's great.
so that's how it's organized from our perspective.
Fantastic. And do you have something that you can leave with us?
I could, if I have a printer access, I
Okay.
can email it to somebody. And
Yeah,
then
that'd be great.
I'll email it to you, Gina. and
That
then
would be
you'll-
fantastic. Thank
There
you.
you go, and you can hand it out to everybody because it is in writing. So
Great. Thank you so much.
welcome.
Welcome.
Hi, my name is Sid Van Korsel. I'm the project director for the Warmline Family Resource Center. We're the PTI for far Northern California. And we see a lot of the same things that Kat talked about. I think the overarching, and you probably will agree with this, overarching issue always is mental health and behavior. And it's becoming more acute as time goes on. We see kids who, you know, have extreme behaviors who maybe shouldn't be identified under IDEA, should get other supports. They're not. The kids who have behaviors that rise to the severity of being identified frequently aren't getting the level of support that they should. And that was actually kind of what I wanted to touch on today was as PTIs, we serve people up to age 26. And I know Kristen recently talked with a group about the gap in services and the poor quality services throughout the state for people over age 22. I really applaud what Sanger's doing. That's just so amazing. But we also know that behavior, mental health issues affect those people too. And because they're not covered under IDEA, there are even fewer services. The communication is worse between agencies. These are really people who have the potential to fall through the cracks, especially when parents aren't involved, which a lot of them aren't.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I know that's kind of a little bit outside the purview of this group, but not really based on what Kimberly was saying, because we know those 22-year-olds are going to continue on.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an important thing that we need to address.
Great. I really appreciate you both coming, and again, apologize that your standing item was not standing on this
Not a problem.
agenda, but glad that you brought the information.
I would love to talk a little bit on what Sid brought up because I'm helping to raise my 14-year-old yesterday was his birthday, 15-year-old grandson.
We'll get that right.
Who has mental health issues. And he got early intervention services when he was birth of 3. And then we chose a charter school that worked really well with him until about 6th grade. And I have 2 grandsons who have issues, and this particular grandson is very much an introverted personality or more of so he's not an extrovert behavior problem. So, he stopped going to school was basically what happened. I'm not going. So we were able now, and again, 6th grade, and this was 9th grade, freshman year, that we were able to get an IEP that helped to address some of the things under other health impairment, to address some of the supports that he might need to, first of all, get him there, and secondly, to look at transition. Because this is going to be, there was a publication written years ago called Tunnels and Cliffs for children who have mental health issues, and you can understand where the terminology might come from. And I think we all are well aware of the fact that juvenile hall and jails and prisons are filled with individuals who had IEPs during school life. So to me, it's a huge issue that I think we're not doing enough for and about. And to say that I just, again, he needed an IEP the entire time. As soon as the problem revealed itself, and we might be further than we are now, although he's doing wonderfully now. So I'm excited about that.
And I think it's challenging flip side to that is the people with autism who have severe behavioral changes in adolescence and as adults. So a child who was compliant, the model student as a youngster in primary grades, hits high school and is suddenly a huge behavior issue. And that's traumatic for families too. Families say, what did I do? And so it's just, like so many things, we see the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much below the surface. And certainly mental health issues and behavior are
all part of that.
Right
Yes,
there.
yes. Well, thank you. I think we do have a question for you, Havania.
Hi, how are you? I wanted to see if you had any more background information on bullying in Orange County. Is there any more information that you can share in regards to that
Well,
item?
let me see what I have written. She did bring up a lot on the call about the Assembly Bill 1455 and how it expands the education's code, that anti-bullying provisions allow school officials to refer bullying victims as well as those who witness or are affected by bullying to, I'm guessing they even qualify for what is that? What is it?
ERMs.
Well, ERMs, but more so they qualify for outside counseling through victim witness programs even, if they're referred from a school site. So that, let's see what else she put. Specifically, she just talked a lot about the law, how it authorizes the superintendent of a school district, the principal of the school, the principal's designee to refer a victim or other pupil affected by an act of bullying to the school counselor, school psychologist, social worker, child welfare attendants personnel, school nurse, other support service personnel for case management, counseling, and participation in a restorative justice program as appropriate. So I'm not clear. She didn't go into the extent. She just said that there's just been a huge rise in Orange County. So that is where their FEC is focused.
So nothing about what that actually looks like.
No, she didn't talk about that much, but yeah.
Well, if you would leave that information with us about the feedback, that would be great.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Very much.
Okay, other questions? Okay, well, thank you both for being here. Okay, we are moving on to item number 2. And Barbara Murchison, I'd like to invite Barbara as our state lead for the ESSA office. Thank you for your flexibility on timing. I know we got a little bit off, but looking forward to your update on the ESSA state plan overview.
Have plenty of fun. There we go. All right. There we are. And display settings. There you go. No, thank you.
Thanks very much. Well, good morning, and Chair Plate and Director Wright and Commissioners. I'm really happy to be here this morning to provide you an update on what's happening with our ESSA state plan and hopefully get a little feedback from you on one of the plan sections.
Oh, good.
Here are our objectives for our time together. Want to make sure that you're all aware of where we are in the plan development process and let you know where we are headed. I want to share with you a number of resources that the department has made available so that you all can engage in providing feedback to the draft plan and hopefully also encourage others in your various organizations and places where you work and live to provide feedback on the draft plan. And then, as I mentioned, I do want to spend a little time with you today getting some feedback on the Title II Part A section of the plan, if we've got time for that, which I think we will. So just some important background information. As you know, ESSA was signed into law way back in December 2015, so it's hard for us to talk about it as a new federal education law anymore. It's been a good year and a half. And every state is required to develop an ESSA state plan that talks about how that state is planning to use federal funds to improve outcomes for students. And our ESSA state plan is headed to Washington, D.C. on September 18th, 2017. So we've had a good year and a half of conversation around the plan, what we'd like to see in the plan. The board has had conversations around the plan, the California Practitioners Advisory Group, and thousands of stakeholders across the state have engaged with us in conversation around this plan. But back in January of this year, our state board felt that it was pretty important to be really clear about what it is we're trying to accomplish with this plan and how ESSA fits into our larger LCFF-based system. And they unanimously approved this set of ESSA state plan guiding principles you see on the screen. Our overall goal is to just have this single coherent local, state, and federal accountability and continuous improvement system. So it's very important that we make sure that ESSA fits in, dovetails with all the work that we're doing around LCFF and implementation of our state law. And wherever there's any kind of tension between federal requirements and what it is we're trying to do here in California with LCFF, LCFF leads and ESSA follows. I think it's pretty clear to everyone that the ESSA tail should not wag the LCFF dog, right? So important as we think about giving feedback that this is really our primary goal, to bring everything into alignment, to bring those systems together so we don't have confusion about different accountability systems or different support systems, one coherent system. And whenever there's any kind of tension between federal requirements and what we're trying to do as a state, the state leads. There are a couple of other important principles on here, but that's really the big picture. You know, we do want to support the implementation of state academic standards. We do want to use the ESSA federal funds and resources to support the LCFF-based work and the 8 state priorities. But really the big idea that we should be thinking of is that we don't want to do something completely out of line with what we're doing with LCFF. These pieces should all work together. So can I just quickly take the temperature of the commissioners? How many of you have had a chance to engage with this draft plan at all before now? All right, good. So I'm encouraged that you all have been in there. I hope you've already provided feedback. If not, those of you who haven't, when you come home from your meeting tomorrow afternoon, we'll rush home we are in the midst of the public comment period and we do want to hear from you. But let me just give you a little bit of an overview of what's in there.
Barbara?
Yes,
Can I
ma'am?
ask a question before we get started? You referenced the CPAG, the California Advisory Practitioners
Advisory group, yes.
Advisory Group, thank you. This is related mostly, but is there a special education representative? You mentioned that the ESSA plan went through CPAG and was approved. Is there a special education representative on the CPAG?
To my knowledge, at this time, we do not have a representative specifically for special education.
Okay, maybe I should have asked Kristen or.
I think originally there was, Matt Navo was on there, who was also on the advisory commission, and since he was replaced on the commission, I think by Kimberly, I don't think that anything
Haven't
else has happened.
replaced that spot right now. And I do want to go back to what you just said. They haven't approved the plan. No one's approved the plan. This is very much a draft plan.
Okay, good.
All right, but yes, in answer to your question, that's something I think that we'll be looking at as we fill positions, like to make sure that we do have someone with a specific special ed.
That'd be great.
Experience. Thank you.
Thank you.
That said, I've been talking to thousands of people around the state for the last year and a half. You'll be encouraged to know that we do have lots of representatives from the special education community coming out to the regional stakeholder meetings that we are having. The CPAG is the board's official advisory body for all things Title I and accountability. but this plan is built on their input, but also the input of the larger California community, and certainly dozens, because federal law encompasses many, many, many programs that impact folks in a lot of different ways. Many staff around the department and certainly state board staff have worked hard over the last year and a half to build what you see in front of you. And in March, and I think this is again something very important to keep in mind as you think about the feedback you're providing, the board asked us to write the plan at a relatively high level to afford the state maximum flexibility moving forward. I think there's concern about getting too far into the weeds of exactly what California is planning to do, because then NED is the U.S. Department of Education, will come out and say, hey, you said on page 72 that you were going to do this, that, and the other thing. And I think as we're moving forward with implementation of LCFF, certainly we've come a long way, but we're committed to continuous improvement. And I think the board didn't want to be locked into a level of detail that may not withstand our continuous improvement approach. So we're looking to submit something that says enough, but doesn't over detail exactly what we're doing. When we brought the draft plan in May, some board members were concerned that there wasn't enough detail. So we're asking you to help us find that sweet spot between too much detail and not enough detail. So bear that in mind as you're thinking. And the board, the plan is written, we're using the template, the third template provided by ED since last year. And because it's a little difficult to differentiate in this kind of technical document, what is the prompt versus what is California's response, we have shaded text boxes that make it more clear to explain, how California is responding to the federal requirements. There's a lot of material in the plan that will not be submitted to ED. In keeping with the high-level approach, we felt like it would be hard for a typical stakeholder who's not really familiar with technical applications for federal funds to understand how does this all fit together. So we provided an introduction, which we hope will help people understand California's larger approach. What is LCFF? What is meant by the California way? And at the beginning of each one of the program sections, each one of the sections of the plan, we have an italicized text, a little bit more information about what is the program, what is the purpose of this program, about how much money are we talking about, and about how many students and schools are served by this program. Because although some of us, I didn't know before I had this job, what is Title V-B? Right? So we've tried to provide additional context so that people could actually say, oh, that's what that is. All of that will be removed before we send it to ED in September, in keeping with this idea of they just need direct responses to the questions. So we find ourselves in the midst of our public comment period. Welcome to the 30-day public comment period. Welcome to phase 4 of ESSA stakeholder engagement. And I've been before you a couple of months ago. I was here to give you an update and been talking to folks around the state since last spring around ESSA. This is our official 30-day public comment period, and we have conducted a set of 11 face-to-face meetings since May 22nd, and have had a couple of webinars, and we'll be having our final webinar this afternoon. But one thing that we heard when we went out and talked to people last spring, folks were very clear that they wanted a set of resources that they could use to conduct their own local meetings, which we thought was a great idea. We know local school districts are engaging folks in conversation around LCFF and LCAPs every year. They were like, could you give us some tools that we could use to run meetings even when you are not here? So you'll notice, I'm gonna take you out to this toolkit that we built out so that people could do their own local meetings, but also to help folks who are working on submitting feedback on their own, who don't have a chance to come to an in-person or online meeting, a little more information to help them understand the contents of the plan. So here's our screenshot of the toolkit page. And I'm not sure, we all interneted up? Should we go look at the page? Let's see what happens. We'll try and be,
Let's go for it.
we'll see how that goes. All right, woohoo! I've learned to celebrate at any opportunity. Woohoo! I think it's a good thing for life beyond ESSA. Any opportunity, yay. All right, so here's our public comment toolkit. You can see on the screen, we've provided a brief overview presentation. So it's the presentation I'm using at regional meetings, and a concise set of facilitator instructions for how you might engage other folks to participate in the stakeholder feedback. But what you'll really see, the bulk of this page, is the draft plan, which again is a relatively technical federal application, right? It's not really that user-friendly, broken out into 11 sections, because it's also kind of not approachable when it's 90 pages of technical. So we broke it out into the 11 sections, and for each section, we have an excerpt. So let's just look at assessment. That is just straight from the plan. That is the plan. And again, relatively technical. We also have a video. We've created a series of short narrated PowerPoints that basically try to use more user-friendly language, so it's not quite as technical. We've been more successful in some places than in others, because some things are just hard to translate. But something that, you can just press play and someone will explain what's in that section, as opposed to you as a coordinator having to explain it. And then for each one of the sections, we also have a concise summary of that plan section, again, trying to be user-friendly, and we've translated that into Spanish. So you'll see as you look at the page, it's a pretty wide array of resources. We know not everybody wants to discuss every section or provide feedback. For those of you who are just now learning what is Title V Part B, maybe you don't have a lot of contributions for that section. But whichever ones you're interested in, down here at the very bottom of the page, to make it easy to find, we have our link to our online public comment survey. And when you get in there and you say, I want to provide feedback on Title I Part A assessment, Title I Part A accountability, Title II Part A supporting effective instruction, then you will get the appropriate survey questions. All right, so I just wanted you to know that this resource is available. Do not feel overwhelmed by engaging with the, there's a lot in there. So we want it to feel more approachable to folks.
And commissioners, I do want to just point out too that you as individuals can go to the public comment survey and fill that out based on the feedback that you've gotten from your stakeholder group.
Yep, so you can conduct a small meeting, you can not conduct a small meeting, but these tools we think will be helpful to individuals and groups. And again, today we're going to have time to get a little feedback on one section of one section, right? So my hope is that you will, again, rush home after your meeting ends tomorrow and provide us with much more feedback on additional sections. You don't even really have to rush. The public comment period is open until next Friday, June 30th at midnight. So this is the question that we've developed and that you will see for each section of the plan, and we tried to make it, again, more accessible, knowing that some people will have much more technical knowledge of each of these programs and have very specific things that they'd like to see changed, and other people just want to share how they think the plan could be improved to better support students and schools, right? At the May meeting, a number of board members asked that we go back to the draft and build it out, strengthen it a little more so that it clearly shows the commitment to equity that's inherent in our LCFF-based system. Again, trying to find the sweet spot. We don't want to talk all about LCFF in the plan because we don't think that the federal government really needs to comment on how we're implementing LCFF, right? But at the same time, we need to strengthen the document so that it better transmits our commitment to equity as a state. So this is what this question is, and really a focus on equity and how do we support students in schools. If you have much more detail, this is a broad question designed to invite people with a lot of expertise around federal programs to give us feedback, and people who may have less but do have some strong ideas about how we can better support kids in schools. So feel free to provide as much detail as you like, and we will be very grateful for it. So the introduction, Again, includes some background on the ESSA, talks a little bit about the California way, what it is we're trying to accomplish here in California in terms of fostering continuous improvement and how do we support schools. It goes over the ESSA state plan guiding principles. I sort of skimmed over them this morning, but if you want to hear some more about them, that's all in there. And really details a bit more around what we're trying to do around the single coherent local, state, and federal system, right? We're trying to bring all of the planning elements into alignment. We don't want folks to do an LCAP and then have to do a whole separate plan for their federal funds. How do we bring those things into alignment? We've already aligned our accountability systems pretty well. The board has worked really, really hard in the last years. The actual signing of ESSA was great timing for the board to be able to meet those federal accountability requirements in the larger LCFF system. So that's happening, and that's great. Our indicators meet both state and federal requirements. And one of the things that we're still working on is coherent supports and interventions. There are certain things that happen under the LCFF around when a district looks like it needs more help. There are a variety of people who will provide those supports. And then ESSA has requirements that we identify a set of schools who need more help. How do we bring the ESSA requirements for supporting schools into alignment with the LCFF-based system? Very interested in getting your feedback on that via the survey, because that's something that's very much still a hot topic. We don't anticipate that we're going to have all of that worked out. How does the Collaborative for Educational Excellence work with the county offices, work with the Superintendent of Public Instruction? How do all of those pieces fit together? May not be fully worked out at the beginning, by the time we submit this plan, but we are looking for feedback from folks around what kinds of supports will be helpful to schools and how can we bring those systems into alignment.
Can I ask a question, Barbara?
Absolutely.
So I realize that I have the opportunity to also pose questions via the survey.
Yes.
Which I will do, but I'm curious, one of the priority areas for the commission is MTSS, or multi-tiered systems of support, as a way of supporting students. And I know that you mentioned in the beginning that you're looking at a very high-level overview, but are there specific strategies like MTSS or UDL? Are they included in the plan, or is that too specific?
Thank you for that question. I think, first of all, you'll be happy to know that our whole state system of support is a very large, we envision it as a very large multi-tiered system of support. That's how much we like that approach, where there'll be a level 1 of supports that are provided to all schools and districts, and then a level 2 where districts that are identified via either the federal system or the state system, there will be more differentiated supports for folks at level 2. And then if people are still not, schools and districts are still not able to move out of level 2 and escalate to level 3, we'll have intensive supports. So our whole state system of support concept, which we're trying to build out and put some more meat on the bones of that concept, is based on MTSS.
That's great.
So that's pretty great. And we are going to take a look. I thought this would be a great section, and it's a good segue. We are going to take a look at this pretty concise supporting effective instruction section. There are only a few places in the plan template that specifically reference students with disabilities. And I know you're going to have assessment and accountability folks providing information to you during your meeting tomorrow. So I thought it would be, I presumed, sorry, I hope you play along. I thought it would be a really useful bit of time for us to just take a look at this Title II Part A supporting effective instruction section, which specifically calls out students with disabilities.
Nice.
And get your feedback on that.
Nice.
So you'll be able to see what it says, and this is a great opportunity for you to say, I get we're trying to be high level, I'd like to see more of this, that, and the other thing.
Nice.
All right?
Great.
So look
We'll
how
play along.
look how you segued me up. There, segued me up. That's a great use of the English language. Just to hear all the draft plan sections and videos, this is just to reinforce, we're only going to be looking at this little tiny bit today. Again, I hope you will engage with the other sections. So if I have 20 copies, if you want to pass those. I'm going to talk just a little bit, and then we're going to take a break, a tiny break for you to read, maybe chat with a neighbor, and then I'm going to collect. And I apologize in advance if I'm going over, but I think this is super important. So this is the prompt you'll see in the plan. Describe how the state, oh, look, it's moving on its own. Describe how the state will improve the skills of teachers, principals, and other school leaders in order to enable them to identify students with specific learning needs, particularly children with disabilities, English learners, students who are gifted and talented, and students with low literacy levels, and provide instruction based on the needs of such students. And our response, which you have the more thorough response in front of you, is that, we have curriculum frameworks, which we use. They inform all manners of the system. They inform teacher preparation, they inform teacher and principal induction, and they are the basis for ongoing professional learning for educators. And certainly, you'll see we have a screenshot in the plan of one of the tables of contents that really talk about how do we address the needs of specific kids. California is pretty advanced in thinking about how we support various kids, and our frameworks provide that basis of that shared understanding. We also talk in this section about English language development standards and how those have been integrated into the curriculum frameworks, and we feel that that's a great strategy for supporting English learners in particular. And then we have a few paragraphs around what California is thinking about when it comes to serving students with disabilities. We reference the One System Reforming Education to Serve All Students report, and we talk about the redesign of teacher preparation standards that's underway. And then finally, we summarize by saying, not only do we do all of this at the state level, we have a California school dashboard now, which allows districts and schools to really look at specific groups of kids, figure out what's happening and what's not happening, and then come together and think about how they can come up with local strategies. What kinds of professional learning do their teachers need and principals need at the local level to better address the needs of kids? So with that, I think I'll give you 2 minutes to look at the draft. And this is, again, just an excerpt, but a piece that I welcome your feedback today, and then I'll hear from you your thoughts. So the question I pose to you right now is, please share your ideas about how this response in the Title II Part A section of the ESSA State Plan could be improved to promote equity and support your students and schools. And again, if something comes to you, please feel free to augment during this. I know I put you on the spot right here. There's plenty more time for you to engage and give more complete answers in the survey for the plan, but I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts right now.
Great. Mildred?
Yeah, I had a question, please. In looking at the document, I see a lot here in regards to impacting the credentialing program. But what happens to, or is it, maybe it's addressed somewhere else, but what happens to the teachers who are already out and in the classroom? Because what we're seeing in many of the districts that I support is the concern that the general education teachers, there's not enough time in regards to preparation because there's such a severe lack of substitutes, unless there is, based on whatever the bargaining agreements are, to make training on a Saturday available. Most of the time it's not mandatory, so you don't have everyone there at those trainings. So there seems to be a lack of consistency from district to district about ongoing training that occurs after a teacher finishes their credentialing requirements. The other concern is I just wonder about how consistent in regards to from university to university each of these areas is being addressed. I sit on 2 boards for 2 universities locally in the Bay Area, and some of this is a 1-unit course. And then there is, for all of this to be included in 1 unit, and I teach it. So I know that there's absolutely no way that I'm doing an adequate job in this area. And then the other concern is the need to have something in regards to the Board of Education's responsibility for each school district. Because I really think that the conversations when you're looking at budget cuts and how, we look at how bargaining it takes, that the conversation, it does not start at the board level. So they're not perhaps as astute about the details of some of this. So if the superintendent or his cabinet don't bring this forward as a priority, then the community boards are not going to be aware of it. And I also know this is something that needs to be discussed with the community advisory boards as well, the CACs, because whenever you're looking at budget cuts and you're looking at an impact on special education, someone is saying, well, we don't have enough special education teachers. When you say, well, yes, we have one system and we're looking at, embracing the one system model, then the concern is the general education teachers do not have the training.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mildred. Yep. Summer and then Barbara.
Hi, I have a concern with when I'm looking at the list of students with disabilities, I would love to have more language in there relative to mental health disorders and behavior. And when I look back at the narrative on the next page, in the 3rd paragraph, the sentence that says that the special education expertise would be available to go into the general education classroom to help students overcome barriers. I would like just some language somewhere in there that some of those barriers are around the area of behavior. It doesn't matter what the disability, but if we're going to be asking general education teachers to get more expertise in that area, that's just such a common concern.
I have a clarifying question, because that's what I was told, that I was supposed to be charming and nice today because I was gone. In the second, which is hard for me, Barbara, you don't understand. In the second paragraph, it says CTC da, 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 da. And this redesign is based on the concept of cross-teaching and will include preparation for general education students and serving students with disabilities. Are we all on the same page? Yes? No. Okay, Barbara. It says the second paragraph, and it talks about that this redesign is based on the concept of cross-training and will include increased preparation for general education students. Teachers and serving students with disabilities. That's why I shouldn't know where I am. I'm reading it wrong. So about the middle of paragraph 2.
All right.
Now, my problem and my clarifying question is, in the third paragraph, when we're talking about the special education teacher, it says it will include additional preparation. Well, isn't it additional preparation for the general ed teacher also? And it makes it sound as if the special education teacher is going to have to take additional preparation, and the others are just going to get some training. And that's a big difference to me, that they both need additional. I mean, which is what I think Mildred was saying, everybody needs it. But I think that if we're talking clarifying, it needs to sound the same, because this doesn't sound the same for what a general education teacher would need to get her understanding and what a special education teacher would need.
Yes, go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, so I just first want to echo Mildred's concern about professional development. So I had that comment underneath the ELD section, because although I think that the framework is very, very well done, my experience is that it has not gotten into the classroom the way it needs to, because there hasn't been professional development. Maybe new kids coming up are getting it in college, but the old timers, we're not getting that. And then also to echo the concerns about mental health, those barriers are also very present for our newcomers from other countries. And I have seen that it has become quite a barrier to them learning English. So to ensure that they can have access to the curriculum that is actually quite good, that we need to be aware of all of those supports as well. So that's my other comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Other questions, comments, thoughts, feedback, commissioners that you'd like to share now, or you'd like to hold it for the survey? Yes, Leanne.
Thank you very much. This is in regards to preparation. I'm kind of curious to know how would both the special education teachers and the general education teachers would prepare when it comes to serving disabled students. This is going back to the second paragraph. I'm kind of curious to know how would it be different?
Question. The Commission on Teacher Credentialing is always, they're very good at continuously updating their standards for their teacher preparation programs. And based on the findings of the statewide special education task force, we're looking at students with disabilities as students first. The CTC has begun to update their preparation expectations for all of the universities that prepare teachers and principals in California. And really, it's about making sure that all people who are prepared think about students with disabilities as students first and have the strategies and tools available to them to be able to help kids be successful regardless of whether or not they have students with disabilities, and then branching out from there to do more specific strategies. It's kind of like an MTSS model made live with the CTC teacher preparation standards as well. So that work is in progress, but I think it's really, I think we should be really proud of that as a state. I mean, I think that task force really laid out an ambitious agenda and set some really clear thinking about how we want all of our students to be treated and how we expect all of them to be held to high standards. And it's exciting to me to be able to share that here and think about how we move forward in making that a reality. So the CTC is pretty well underway in that work and continues
to update their teacher prep standards.
And if I can add to that, the universities are already putting in place those general ed teacher performance expectations. And we have a number of universities already that have basically blended their general ed and special ed credentialing programs and then are branching. So everyone's getting preparation together, learning all the essentials of how do you serve a diverse classroom that really serves the full continuum of learner. And and so the question that's still to be answered at CTC, and I encourage you to keep an eye on that, is the ed specialist credential changes that are upcoming. And there's a number of recommendations that have been made. So I would track that because that's where they're trying to decide where the branching happens and what folks are responsible for within the context of what credential that they have. And so to the points that are written that Barbara was referring to, talking about special ed teachers having more experience teaching the general ed curriculum, which has been, we've heard from special ed teachers they want more of, and general ed teachers getting much more around the behavior and how to really do better reading interventions and more strategies is also on the general ed side. That's already in place, and so they're starting to roll that out over the next few years across prep programs, many who have already started doing that this year and last year, and with some of the CEDAR work from the CEDAR universities like Long Beach.
All right. Oh, sorry.
Oh, yeah, sorry, Kimberly, go ahead.
Just real quick on the second paragraph, I think maybe when it's talking about California recognizing that most students with disabilities receive much of their instruction, I think that may hold true if we're just looking at the totality of special education, because we are talking about students who may be receiving just speech language services or RSP-based services. But I think if we added in there more significant disabilities, I think that sentence would change. I think students that have significant disabilities may not be receiving much of their instruction in the general education classroom, and that may be an overreach in that sentence, and it may be more critical to maybe call that out specifically, so that we're having an expectation that all students are receiving much of their instruction in the general education classroom, and that we're preparing our teachers not only for students who have learning differences, but may have some more significant disabilities and needs in that general education.
Something like the full range, students with the full range of needs.
Yeah.
That language and making it more clear. All right, so thank you for all of the feedback. Again, I didn't mean to surprise you with it, but I couldn't let this opportunity go by.
That's great.
When I have you all here, I'm sorry about your schedule. I will try and be concise with the rest of my presentation. And again, encourage you to get in there and provide more, have a little more time with this and the rest of the Title II section and provide us with more feedback. And I appreciated the level of specificity around these particular words we could maybe look at tightening up. So I wanted you to be aware of the timeline and where we are. Every time I used to present a timeline, I used to put draft in the front and asterisks in the back saying, oh, this timeline is probably going to change. This timeline's probably not going to change. We're getting close to the end. We did present the draft plan. They not unanimously, most of them, they approved bringing the draft out for the 30-day public comment period. We are in the midst of the public comment period. Our practitioners advisory group has already provided feedback on all 10 sections of the plan, and we have until next Friday, June 30th, before the public comment period ends. So you do have time to get in there and provide more comment. At the July meeting, we're going to be sharing with the board the CPAG feedback and kind of an overview of what we heard in the public comment period, and be seeking approval to make some revisions to the plan based on all that feedback. And then in the September meeting, we anticipate that the board will approve this plan for submission to the United States Department of Education. We have a few days to turn that around, make sure all of our T's are crossed and I's dotted, send that to ED, and then they have 120 days to get back to us around whether they approve it or whether they'd like to see some more information. So this is a pretty important page. I think most of you, it's sort of a standard page. You probably know how to find me by now, and you know how to get your questions around ESSA answered. But in particular, as you're moving through the tools, if questions come up, please don't hesitate to reach out. assetcde.ca.gov. There's a handy link to the toolkit right there. And please feel free. I'm not doing regional meetings in the next week and a half because we've got them done. So I'll be upstairs in my office, happy to help if questions come up or, things you want to talk about with the toolkit.
Yeah,
I
she's
am
ready.
thrilled. That's the happy part of my job. I mean, I like a lot of the parts of my job, but I love talking to folks about what's going on. I want to hear from you what you think and ways that we could really strengthen this and move forward with a plan that we feel good about. So thank you for your time.
Barbara, thank you for your information and the opportunity to engage on the content directly. We always appreciate that opportunity. And we have the survey link. We have the resources we need to do our own mini trainings or take the info back to our groups and share it and provide that link to survey to others. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your adjusting the time. I know we ran a little late and now we're still on time. So thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, commissioners, we are going to break for lunch. Before we do that, though, we all wear many, many hats in the world. We wear our professional hat, we wear our parent hat, maybe we wear our, I don't know, there's probably plenty of hats. But with that, if a family joins us for commission, I always like the opportunity to point it out. So with that, I'd love to hand the mic to Kayla. Anyone you want to introduce, Kayla?
Well, I'll be very happy to introduce maybe a future commissioner, self-advocate Diego is sitting in the audience. He just wave. Hi. He's Diego, and then my son Diego, he's 11 years old, and then Kayla is 13. She's my teenager, and my husband, Everardo Rodriguez, is here, who's in the law enforcement field. He's actually division manager for the juvenile division. So Lester, I'm so sad that Lester's not here. He would love to talk with him about.
That would have been perfect.
Yes. So thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all for coming. All right. With that, commissioners. Yeah. Thank you, Barbara. Yes. Mildred, if you are okay, we will come back right after lunch to item 3. Okay, thank you. All right, and with that, commissioners, I will see you back here at 1:15. All right, thank you. Welcome back, commissioners. It's nice to see everybody. I hope you had a lovely lunch. Welcome, Dr. Winlock. It's nice to see you. No need to apologize. It's great to see you. Okay, commissioners. Well, if you will remember, we ended our meeting before lunch at item 2. So I'd like to jump right back into item number 3, and that is the report out of our mental health subcommittee, which met early this morning. Thank you, Mildred, for leading that group. Would you like to give us a report out of the discussion?
Sure, and I'll ask Barbara to piggyback if I leave anything out. It was a very rich discussion. We had, Barbara and I were the commissioners there. Michelle and Steve were not able to be there this morning. And then we had several people from public guests that were there, in terms of Elizabeth Estes. And 3 people were on the phone who called in. Okay. And we also had Richard Connect from Placer County Mental Health present. We had several agenda items, with the first being reviewing the information that CDE had compiled in regards to our 2 questions that we asked. Just for everyone's information, since we haven't met in a while, is that the 2 questions that we asked were, what grants or initiatives exist within CDE that support mental, behavioral, and social-emotional health services for children, both within the special ed division for children with disabilities and across other divisions in the department. The second question was, what data does CDE collect specific to the behavioral, social, or emotional mental health of children and our youth? So we received a document, thank you, Matt, this morning, that we, just based on the concern around time, that we haven't had a chance to really go through and look at the information to see exactly what information is being shared. We said that we would certainly take the time, and now Michelle has a copy. I'll get a copy to Steve, that we'll take a look at it and get feedback for the next meeting. The other information was, that was discussed is that Emily Higgs from Seneca was on the call, and she represents the summit that happened in March, and it's about how to address issues around children, students with intense mental health needs. And Gina was a part of that. I was invited, was out of the country, but it was a very rich conversation, and our Gina is on the small group steering committee, where apparently 3 proposals are being discussed. One in regards to services for those students with the intense needs. Also reframing from an ideological standpoint about how those services should happen. And the issue is that because of the lack of services, the cost of services, and that many of the agencies, because of lawsuits and many other concerns and lack of staffing, the agencies that traditionally serve those students are no longer servicing students. For example, in Edgewood is right there in San Francisco's backyard, and they refuse to serve any students with intense needs. And Seneca is also not serving these students. So students are, school districts are having to send their children to out of state and lock facilities, very expensive, out of their home community, and it's the most extreme concern around not being able to look at LRE. It's not the least restrictive environment, it's the most out of whack in terms of LRE. So the 3 position papers will be coming from Seneca, and about these 3 areas and how to address them. They're looking at programmatic options to enhance service options in the state of California. They're looking at what role the charter schools might play, and also looking at other ways of being able to provide services. Our comments about some of the options that were vetted was certainly around LRE, creating a dumping ground for children of color, because these students will be isolated, particularly if they are expected to get their education through like a cyber high situation in terms of online or in a home and hospital capacity. So Emily is going to continue to keep us abreast of that and is very excited about our work. We also spent a little while, not a lot, because we know we're going to be talking about it here, about some current legislation. Was not able to touch very much on other than the fact of where some of the legislation that Michelle had brought forward, where it stands now. And then we were real excited to have Kai from, who's on the state, I don't remember her last name. I'll get her last name for the minutes. I have it, I just don't remember it. And she was at our last meeting. Michelle may remember, is that she was talking about how to help or collaborate with the commission on addressing those 2 questions that we talked about initially. And she did talk about that there is a workshop or a convening of a large summit on June 30th. I can send that to Venetia to send out. It's open to the public, and it's discussing developing a pilot study that is a collaborative model. They seem to already have approval to move forward and have 15 schools participate in this collaborative study. They've been working in Riverside County, and it's the pilot study would be enhancing mental health services for preschoolers through 3rd grade.
Right, but they had to have already had PBIS working, and that they could show that so that they weren't just somebody coming in who had not even tried it. So they had to have PBIS, positive behavioral intervention and support, whatever, okay? See, I the wrong thing, and that they were going to have to go through a couple of vettings so that they really knew who they were picking for this pilot. They weren't just picking the first 15 schools that came off.
And they're using MHSA money.
Right.
To fund those programs at those 15 schools. She also mentioned that there is a link that she's going to send us about what they're doing about researching where all the monies are going in regards to mental health. It was like I said, it was really helpful to have Richard connect there. And that pretty much leads us to some of our recommendations, in that we talked about the system of care as being the overarching delivery model for mental health services in each of the counties. And as many, if you have worked with the system of care, you know that and originally, it started out very successful according to the county. So based on the county was how successful it was. And as the money faded away, so did the achievement results. And so it just fell apart as the leadership changed and the money fell apart. So what's being proposed now is the conversation around System of Care 2.0 and developing interagencies agreement, county by county, where school districts would be involved, child welfare, behavioral health directors, and probation officers. So he indicated that there will be an MOU that will come forward that will be a catalyst for the work on system of care. And so what we really would like is to, when we get to agenda planning, is to talk about having him come and do a presentation for all of you, hopefully in August, about the system of care and what the system of care 2.0 would look like, because I really think that is something as a commission that we could recommend support. The other was the big question, Michelle, and he gave a very detailed summary of why what we want to do is almost impossible unless, in terms of answering those two questions, still springing back to those two questions, he went on, and that's where Barbara said help, because she was taking such great notes and using lots and lots of acronyms that no one knew other than he knew, and they're all mental health acronyms, but basically saying that our request to do the analysis to find out all the funding streams, how the money's being utilized, and what money's for what children, and how to create a transparent model that talks about accountability. He said it would take about, there's not one person in the state of California that we could dispatch to do that work, and that it would be like 6 people who are all over all those pots of money that would need to come together to decide this is work that they would like to do. And he said that it's probably bigger than his group to be able to bring that forward, and truly for us to do that would be a little daunting.
And he explained that what's really difficult is that we want to commingle money because we want to have one coherent system. We want to make sure everybody is getting what they're supposed to get. The problem is when you're saying, and I think that's where part of the problem is and why we can't find where these streams are. But I think that what he was talking about was so important for all of us to hear, because it was like so over my head, and I'm sure it's not if I hear what he says, but it really would give a basis of what we need to know in mental health on a real bottom level, so that we could then have conversations and really ask questions that we needed to ask. But he had said you just have to understand how difficult this is. He said, and we had counties that were really doing it well.
As far as the commingling and collaboration. And he said now all of that has pretty much fallen apart, and that none of the legislation has met the needs of students. You know, right now, there are pots of money that are going on, but special ed is not being even considered to be a part of it. They're children that get monies based on their socioeconomic status, but special education many times gets left out. So we really think that it was a light bulb kind of went on to say, wow, if we can't find a way of being able to categorize and do this fiscal audit or know anyone who can, at least perhaps as the commission, we could really understand the system of care 2.0 and what's being proposed, have everyone have an opportunity to hear that discussion, and then see if we could kind of come up with what our next steps are as far as proposing and moving forward.
And Elizabeth Estes has been speaking to universities to see what they might want to do. And UCSB has a program right now called Vitality Testing, where they take every student in your school, takes 15 minutes, they test every kid, and they find out where they are on the scale so that you can watch and see, and every teacher would know. She said
Universal screener.
Universal screener. UC Davis was willing to possibly work with some of their doctoral students who were willing to do this because they might find that interesting. So it's not like people aren't out there trying to find. We're just still at the very beginning.
So that was our 1 hour and 45-minute meeting.
Nice.
And the recommendation would be to certainly have another planning meeting for August.
Okay.
But also to see if we could have time on the agenda to bring Richard Connect in to do the training on, well, a presentation on system of care, what it was, and then what he anticipates would be a better approach as far as system of care 2.0.
Very nice. I really appreciate the ongoing discussions, and I know it requires folks to be up here early, so thank you for doing that. You probably had the same disheartened feeling that I have now. You probably had this morning, because I know that you guys had a big vision of figuring out how do we start to untangle all of these systems. I do think, though, I'm excited to hear about a presentation from Richard on systems of care, and even going back and defining the different languages that everybody is using. I feel like we don't have a translator yet.
And he's willing to do that in his presentation.
That would be really helpful. And I know from living in a number of these different fields, there is not cross-field knowledge or understanding about the different languages we're all speaking. So even starting there in a system of care, I feel like we've also talked about SELPA 2.0, so maybe there's some alignment with system of care 2.0. I see a theme. So thank you for doing that, and we can talk later about connecting with him for the August agenda, and we can loop Matt and Stacy into that conversation. We're in one of those quick turnarounds. We'll do agenda planning this afternoon, but we're in one of those quick turnaround time periods. You know, we had the luxury of October to February for agenda planning one time. Now we literally need a draft of the August agenda this week. And so this is good timing. We'll make sure we figure that out and make sure he's available for the dates.
So what we can do is get the document. I will send it to Venetia so everyone can see the information that was compiled by CDE.
That'd be great.
And certainly any questions that come up, you could let us know so we can ask questions back about. It's very dense document. Matt, you have extras?
No, but you have
Okay.
you have one that you can send to her. So
No, I have it. I have his electronic copy. Okay, I can send it to Venetia.
That's great. Thank you, Mildred. I'm excited about that presentation. And then the same time for the August meeting? Great, okay. Perfect, thank you. Any questions for Mildred or the other folks on the committee? Awesome. All right, we are moving on. We are on item number 4. So this is our small group discussion. So, we've had a couple of meetings where we've been full of content, and I got the feedback that folks really like breaking into small groups. So excited to bring those back. And then also wanted to thank, I believe it was the Mental Health Subcommittee group that made the suggestion that we revisit our priority areas. And then you'll all remember there was lots of feedback at the last meeting about reviewing some legislation. So we're going to do both of those things today. So let me start by, why don't you pull out in your packet, there's a document that has the strategic plan and ledge platform, item number 5. Thank you, Barbara. So I'm going to give you instructions, and then we are going to break into 2 groups. You can choose if you meet here in the large room or if you want to go in the small. Can we have the small media room, Matt? Okay, thanks, Venetia. You can pick which one you want to go to. We know choice is always important. So let me start first by talking about the priorities. So in our past few meetings, we have talked about the charge of the commission. The charge of the commission is to weigh in on areas that are coming up in the field that our appointing bodies need to know about. They need to know from you as the experts what your thoughts are on a number of different items. Now, we all know that there are many, many items that really need expert input right now in our field, or always in our field. And so in order to make our agendas and our discussions more effective and more meaningful, we have narrowed down and tried to prioritize areas that we should use to structure our agendas, or to try to put some order into the items that come before us. In addition, we articulated what are sort of position statements for each of those priority areas that we came up with. And we did this in February of last year. And I'm looking at the document, I think it's on page 3, 2.5, yeah, that has the pillars. So what I would like you to do today, as it relates to this document, I'm going to give you multiple instructions. I know it's after lunch, but we're going to do our best. So you're going to first, when you break into your group, you're going to first look at this priority document, and you're going to look at the very first statement at the top. Now, I will warn you that wordsmithing is something that groups can fall into easily. We are not interested in wordsmithing. We are interested in, does this capture the role of the commission? Should it be edited? Should it be updated? And you heard me say earlier, you've all heard me say this in multiple settings now, as we think about the work that we're doing in special ed, what is the North Star, or what are we mapping to? And should that be included in our statement in some way? That is not an easy task. We have a time limit. So think about that. Should this be updated? And then please review the 4 areas. Do they need to be changed? Are these still the 4 areas that we should use to structure the majority of our discussions at the commission? And you'll see at the bottom, these are the other areas that we think are also needing of attention. It doesn't mean we're not addressing other issues, but this is sort of our guiding document. Folks outside of the commission can say, if we want to know what the commission's all about, they can look at this document and get a glimpse into not just what we're focused on right now, but what are some statements representing our position in those areas. For each group, we are very fortunate that Michelle and Summer agreed to, I'm not going to use the word facilitate, because it's an equal ownership of the process for commissioners, but they agreed to guide the discussion. And we also need a scribe or someone that's willing to document or take notes on how the discussion goes so that you can bring a summary of the discussion back to this body. Okay, any questions on this document for the priority areas? Okay, the second part of your small group meeting has to do with legislation. Now, at the last meeting, we talked about a whole list of bills. Matt has done a phenomenal job of tracking daily all of those bills. These are the bills that still exist. There are some others, but these are the ones that really were at a point in the process that made sense to put them on the agenda and get your input. Now, I've had this discussion with a few folks, and I just want to remind you as we go into this discussion. You are an advisory body, which means your appointing body, the governor, the state board, the legislature, and CDE, are looking for your input as it relates to a number of different things. They're looking for your input related to the topics addressed in these bills. They're not necessarily looking for just a yay or yes or a no. They're looking for context. And they're looking for your input about how they should be thinking about this legislation. What are some pitfalls they should be aware of? What are some things they really should take notice of? So as you have these discussions, Matt is going to help facilitate or lead that because he is our content expert on legislation. He's going to give you an overview. And then he has the actual text of the bill. But your task is to identify some areas that you are supportive of and or concerned about that we should be passing on to our appointing bodies. Yes, Michelle. Okay, thank you. All right, so now let's talk about process. So we're going to have two groups. One is going to start, if you're in here, you're going to start with legislation and you're going to start with Matt. If you go to the small group room, you're going to start with priorities and then you're going to swap halfway through.
And is it a 2-hour time frame still?
We're a little off our agenda. Smaller group means a need for less time, right? So I am trusting that we're way off our time. So we're going to still plan to end at 3:15, and you might find that we get done sooner. And if you get done sooner, you should go ahead and take your break. And if we get done way sooner, we'll reevaluate. If we need more time, we'll reevaluate. Of course, if you need a break sooner, do that. And then we'll regroup here in the main room for a report out, both on our priorities and needs to update and the feedback or the overarching thoughts on the legislation. Questions? Comments? Sure is quiet. Okay, so like I said, you may meet in here. You can choose here or in the other room. We'll break now. Thank you, Michelle and Summer. Matt, you want to start in here? Can I just make one more comment? If you are a member of the public, we welcome and encourage your voice in our conversation, so you have the same choice. You may start in here or you may start in the small media room. Okay, thank you. All right, commissioners, welcome back. We are nearing the end of our first day. You've done a great job. So we split into two groups. We had a task related to our priorities, and we had a task related to reviewing legislation. So I love to hear how those conversations went. Any thoughts, any suggestions that you have for us to take into consideration? Should we do it by group? Do I have a group that's interested in going first? Okay, thanks, Michelle.
So my group was very cohesive. So the first thing we did is we looked at the vision statement, and we wanted to make it a little bit more concrete about what we were hoping students would achieve eventually, like what's our end goal. And then also in looking at our 4 priorities, we were a little concerned that multi-tiered systems of support was just too big and too broad and kind of almost encompassed everything else in our priorities anyway. So we moved the concept of multi-tiered system of support into our vision statement so that our priorities could become more focused. So what we were looking at, and this is just like really super rough, within the multi-tiered system of support, the Advisory Commission on Special Education supports initiatives that develop and connect systems that support self-advocacy, inclusion, meaningful employment, and personal life satisfaction for all students with individual education plans throughout their development. Kind of broad. And then the priorities, many of them remain, although maybe beefed up. So family, and we thought about moving family to the first pillar because kind of everything starts with family. And so to make the pillars kind of move in a connected flow. So family, and then beef up the self-advocacy element of that pillar. Second one, accountability. Instead of assessment, we wanted to broaden it out to accountability because then we could look at CASP and LCFF and LCAP plus other types of accountability in terms of teacher preparedness and other things like that. The next one, instead of MTSS, we were looking at supports and services, social, emotional, behavioral, and academic. And then finally, transition and employment. So still transition, but adding employment to that because transition services obviously incorporate employment, but it wasn't as clear as we wanted it to be that we want our students to have meaningful employment. And transition also involves a lot of things like self-advocacy, having a meaningful support group around you, and other things like that. So that's where we were at with that. Now I'm going to pause to say, team members, did I miss anything? Do you want to clarify or add? No? Good? Okay. So in terms of the legislation, we'll start from the easy one and go up. Oh, should we stop and have the group?
And have the other group do it? So
Sure.
About, I mean, I'm
Same, that's
thinking
right. So then we can have a conversation about just the priorities in the vision statement. Yeah,
okay,
sounds great. I will stop right there, and then whoever's going to represent for the other group.
Do you facilitate it? Do you want me to do off the notes? Okay. We took a little different spin on it in that the overarching, as far as we added to the first statement and added language that says committed to one coherent system that ensures students with disabilities receive a high-quality education by advocating for and supporting initiatives that promote inclusion, successful completion of high school, college, career, and community readiness, and access to necessary educational services and adequate funding to ensure that every student has the opportunity to succeed in his or her future. So it was adding to that first sentence. We talked a lot in our group around assessment. And Summer, you want to talk about what we talked about? Or do you want me to just summarize your notes? Okay. Is that assessment was first when we did this in February because it was a burning issue at the time, and it was very unclear about the assessment instruments that were being used. Accountability is as far as who was going to be assessed. And one of our commissioners wanted to add, expand the first box of assessment that talks about informal and formal assessment to guide instruction, and to add that as a sentence that would be incorporated in the first box. We went on to the second box as far as MTSS, and that's where I think that we saw a lot of activity, a lot of energy that woke everybody up because clearly we all are very passionate in regards to this second bucket. And basically the concern was that we have spent a lot of time and energy talking in the last few months about mental health and access, and nowhere have we addressed mental health. So we went back and forth about, do we want to not be limited by the page as far as these 4 areas and add a separate pillar that talks about mental health. And somehow we need to frame that language, and we haven't done that. But one statistic that we talked about and discussed is that in any given year, 1 in 5 children experience a severe emotional or behavioral health disorder that results in substantial to extreme impairment affecting their quality of life and ability to function successfully in school and in the community. So we need to work with what that pillar is going to look like. That would be a separate pillar basic after we get agreement that from the entire group that we do want it as a separate pillar. The other area that we want to focus on, though, is the work and conversation from this morning is that the concern about funding is that many times we're not at the table where resources and supports for mental health are being discussed. So somehow we also need to add that in, that we need to have some approach that's more collaborative to ensure participation of education when these critical issues are being discussed. So we have a silo that needs to be developed after we get consensus that is where we're going. Transition, we changed the language to say emphasize the necessity of early post-secondary transition planning and ensure that all students have access to employment, independent living, and other quality of life choices. We did talk about what exactly that meant, and I have several notes that we can go back and add. And there was also concerns about not having adequate funding as also a separate pillar, that we needed to maybe not just have adequate funding as a part of the overarching vision statement or the first statement, but to have a separate pillar that talks about the need for adequate funding. And then finally, family. And there was a lot of conversation about family and what that means. And we did have some wording: strengthen and sustain the infrastructure of collaboration between the school and families to ensure proactive and ongoing involvement around policies, programs, and services created to allow students to succeed. So, like I said, is all draft language, and everyone would have to agree. Also, under additional priorities of adding mental health, or a statement about mental health being a priority at the bottom.
Very nice.
So, Summer or...
And it was suggested that maybe instead of them looking like pillars, because we don't want to be siloed, maybe they should look like arches that they connect with one another as a visual. If we're handing this to a senator, an assembly person, or somebody from the state board, when they look at it, there's a visual that really we're working together. We're not siloing also.
I would say that's really important so that they don't get cherry-picked and worked on independently, and we don't have others that aren't addressed at all.
Yes.
So if they're
Excellent
integrated, if
point.
we integrate them more, they can't be taken apart in layers.
So I'm a little concerned about the funding pillar, though, because, I mean, obviously funding can be woven into any of the other areas. I'm just not sure if that's outside of our scope or not. So that's what my question is. Is that within our scope or not to have funding as a front burner issue for us?
Well, the reason it would be a front burner issue is that if in fact there is legislation, this was our calling card that we developed, that whenever we went in to meet with the legislature or individuals about our role and what our priorities, then this is something that we would present.
Mm-hmm.
And so the conversation of our smaller group was the fact that everyone agreed that adequate funding to support special ed was a high priority.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it was thought to be. So I don't think our desire to have adequate funding, I don't think takes away, or I think it just is part of our role
Mm-hmm.
in advocating for students with disabilities in regards to the adequate funding for their needs.
Mm-hmm.
Right, I was just wondering if the funding could be worked into the verbiage under each of the pillars instead of being a separate pillar itself. I guess that's my...
I'm only saying what came from our group.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious. Yeah.
Well, can I just believe that the reason why we're saying that is that when they are looking at any legislation, we're advocating that they should be looking at the funding part to support that that legislation. So it was more kind of an idea that when you look at these pillars, all of these ones are ones that they should be using as a lens to kind of look at their legislation, because these are the things that we're saying that we really want to advocate for. And funding was a huge, whether it's adequate, whether there's enough, that's what we want them to do, is look at their consideration of that.
Yeah,
I'm wondering if that was outside of our scope. I think that's a good question, and I don't know the answer to that, but I'm wondering, because I liked the way Mildred was talking about adequate representation at the table when those conversations are happening, which would really be a way to have advocacy there, but we would be advocating through one of our pillars for adequate representation at all conversations that have to do. And that may be, we may be able to do that if it's outside of our scope, to advocate directly for or against a funding model.
I do think I like the way Mildred articulated that it's like a calling card. These are the areas that we know that we have some opinions about, and that we will prioritize items in the field that come up that we need to be weighing in on. And I think about, our April meeting, we had a very significant mega item about special ed funding and service delivery. And I think that there's the potential for that to come back in some way. It is true what you say, Michelle, about funding being incorporated. We can't incorporate it into these other areas. And what I'll ask of you is that, we're not deciding anything right now. I would love for you to send to us your feedback. Barbara and I can hash it out. And maybe Matt, since he's not in the room, we can suggest that Matt maybe take a stab at putting it all or incorporating it all into one document and sending it back to us. I do want to say I appreciated sitting in each group for a little while, because each group had a very different characteristic to it. And each group represented exactly what I think the commission's charge is. The commission's charge is to look at issues and talk through the difficult pieces around each of them, to grapple with some of the challenging issues, identify the pros, identify the cons, identify the areas that are potentially landmines, if you will, or have unintended consequences. It's the process of talking through that is so valuable. And I appreciated our facilitators, and not just Michelle and Summer's facilitation, but everybody's ability to engage and help contribute to that facilitation. I thought it really was a valuable conversation, and appreciate the process. I don't want to stop. Mildred, did you get through all of your feedback? Okay. So if you will, send those in. And if you have another thought, there's things that didn't just get shared from both groups that I had taken notes about that I thought were really important points. We will take a stab at incorporating those and updating it. And while I thought they might be very minor tweaks to our form, might be a little bit more significant than we had originally anticipated, which I think is exciting. So I really appreciate the discussion. So now, should we go back to Michelle for the legislative piece?
Okay, so I'll start with the easy ones. The resolution 54 for supporting the motion for mental health. We thought that it would be great for us to write a letter in support of that Mental Health Month, May, which has already passed. And then for the resolution 52, a letter that praises the idea of a Kid Health Week, but recommends the addition of mental health to focus on overall kid health, to keep the focus on the whole child. That would be a recommendation in a letter that we would support. AB 312, there's not much to be done here. The reality is that I don't think it's going to go very far, because it's a bill that has a lot of funding required, and that's not going to happen. So I'm not sure if there's anything to be recommended. SB 354. We went back and forth on the timelines. We went through this pretty thoroughly. I'm sure the other team did too. There was a lot of discussion because of the number of languages that are represented in the state of California, and then also some of the issues with translating documents before you have a signed IEP, and then the breadth of documents that are required to be translated. So there was a lot of conversation back and forth. One of the comments that we all kind of agreed upon was that if it was a staff recommendation in the paperwork that the timeline go for the top 8 languages of the district. Not that if you speak another language, you wouldn't have a translation. It's just that the 30-day or the 45-day time frame wouldn't necessarily apply to that. Just coming from a district where there's 300 different languages, most of the time 8 covers most of it, but once in a while you get something very unusual and it can be very challenging. So that is kind of where we were at. I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on the timeline discussion that we had, a lengthy timeline discussion. No? Mm-hmm. Yeah, there was a lot to be said there, actually, yeah.
There was a lot to be discussed around the timeline, and the organization that I work for does have a support position on this, and we've been supporting it with the 30-day timeline rather than the 45-day. But while we were in our meeting, I was texting the sponsor of the organization and the staff person who's been writing it and asking if there was some sort of consensus in why they got to 45. And she shared what that was with me. But I do want to put a motion on the table, and I do want a motion that we support the bill with a timeline that consists of between 30 to 45 days. So I motion to support AB 312 with 354, with the caveat that translation be provided within 30 to 45 days, and that be specified in the support letter.
You mean give them a range is what you're saying?
Give them a range, so 30 to 45 days. The amendment was changed to 45 days. It was originally 30 days, so that's why I'm doing that.
She really wants 30.
And we had some discussion about it in our work group, so I'm putting a range in the letter.
So you'd be perfectly fine with 30 is what you're saying?
No,
Yeah.
she would be.
30 to 45.
I second.
Great.
Second.
Are we clear about what the motion is? Can you say it again?
My motion is that the commission supports SB 354 with a timeline of providing translation within 30 to 45 days.
And the current status of the bill says 45 days. Okay. Okay. So we have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
Second, a second time.
I don't know if that is different.
To 40, since it already says 45 days.
45, it's not like they couldn't, basically, it's like, well, they have to do it, they can't do it in 29 days now.
Exactly, that would be the.
Right, it's actually more restrictive
So,
the way you're saying it. That's what I was
yeah.
wondering. It's more restrictive that way almost.
Got it.
That's why you have to talk it out.
Because it's not up to 30. I mean.
Should we come back or?
No, I motion that we support the bill with the 30-day as recommended in the initial bill. 30 days to provide translated information.
Okay. All right. So do we have a second?
I just have a question. I just have a clarifying question then.
So then you're telling them you don't support it at 45. So basically you're in opposed position. Okay.
So the motion would be, I want to make sure I understand the motion. The motion is to not support the current version of the bill, which says 45 days. To support the original bill of 30 days. Do we have Kristen, do you want to?
So I'm trying to think of how that comes. Like when you send it, you have to say either you support the bill the way it is or you don't. And so you might want to say, we just don't want to confuse we want them to know where you guys stand. So I'm agnostic to what you want to do. I just want to make sure that you get your voice heard. So if you want it, if you oppose it, if it's anything above 30.
All right, I'll make another motion. I motion that we support SB 354 and strongly encourage language be provided in translated form with the 30-day timeline. Got that, Matt?
It's what the original bill said.
It's the original bill. It's just keeping it and saying strongly support. I'm not saying amend.
Are you writing it out?
Well, I think in this case, if we were talking about supporting it, it'd be a support if amend. And as it stands, being neutral, you know, so be neutral on current legislation, support if amended. And the amendment would be to amend it back to the original 30 days. So that would be at the top.
Is different than supporting it the way it is, right? So it's whatever you want, but just so we're really clear on what it is.
Yeah, I was trying to keep away from the amended language. I know I do this for my own organization, but I was trying to keep away from the amended language. All right, changing it again. I motion that we support SB 354 with the amendment of a 30-day timeline.
Haggling over semantics, but the way the bill currently reads is 45 days. So you oppose the bill unless amended. Is that correct?
Yes.
But it has
So I just want to make sure I understand. I want to make sure I understand. So we are saying that based on the conversation, you are making a motion that the commission take a position of oppose the current status of 45 days unless it is amended to 30 days. So we have a motion on the floor. Stephen, do you have a question?
I have a clarifying question. So as a commission, I don't support that. I believe that I want to support it in the way that it's written with 45 days. So,
okay, hold on.
So, okay, that's what I'm just trying to get some clarification.
Yeah. So what we actually need is let's just note that we need Lester, right? We need a second. So do we have a second for our motion? No, we have the motion on the floor we read was oppose unless amended. SB 354. Do we have a second on SB 354, the commission opposing the 45-day timeline unless it is amended to 30 days? Do we have a second? I do not hear a second. Motion dies. Okay, so commissioners, this was a good conversation. I feel like there's more conversation that we should have. Michelle, you were doing your update on the bills. Did you get through all of the update that you wanted to do?
Yeah, I just, with any of the timelines, I wanted the bill to be considered the top 8 languages, but as considered anything, but I don't feel ready to put a motion forward. It was just a conversation about what would be most effective.
Okay.
So,
I'd like to put a motion forward to support we did talk and knew that this was going to come up this way. And so I don't think there's any sensitive feelings. But we are would recommend support from the commission. A letter be written for SB 354 as it's written for the 45 days.
So we have a motion on the floor
Second.
to support, wait, hold on. I'm a process person. It takes me a while.
Everybody has their thing.
So we have a motion on the floor to support SB 354 as it stands at 45 days. Do I have a second?
Second,
Okay.
I think, right?
Now we have a second. Now we have the opportunity for discussion or questions. Barbara?
I have discussion. I had never thought about what Michelle had said about the 8 primary languages. And I don't think that that's a bad idea. I mean, I don't know how you feel, but I'm just saying, so it's not like she's saying that she doesn't think everybody else will get it, but she thinks that that 45 days should be for the 8 major. Am I understanding correctly?
that's a staff recommendation in the document.
Oh, it's in there
It's in there already. It's
Oh, I
not
thought
part of the bill, it's just a recommendation. So that the timeline be limited to the 8 major languages of a district. Not that the other people would not get a translation, just because there are some very unusual languages.
Okay, so I take back my question. I'm feeling like you, Steve.
So we have a motion, we have a second, we have the opportunity for discussion. We also have the opportunity for public comment on the motion. And the motion, again, is to support SB 354 in its current form, recommending 45 days. Seeing no public comment. We will take a vote. Then I have comment. After the vote. So let's vote on all in favor. No. All in favor, SB 354, the motion for the commission to support SB 354 in its current form, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, vote yes. Raise your hand if you vote no. 2, raise your hand if you abstain. The motion does not pass. No, we do not have a.
It's a quorum of the whole, it's not who's present.
Oh, well, then we shouldn't even have made a motion then. I mean, that should have been brought in after the vote. If we couldn't do it, then we shouldn't have done it. We don't have a quorum today. Is that it?
So, it's my understanding that the vote is of the total, Venetia, do you think am I making stuff up? That it's the total number of, like when we vote, I know this is true for when they vote for chair, so I'm just going back to just voting in general.
My understanding that it's the majority of the appointed commissioners.
Yes. Is that 8? It has to have 8? Is that right?
So then when we're voting for chair, because we're missing so many people, the odds are we may not win, somebody may not win an election this time.
Those people that aren't here have already submitted their ballots.
Oh, okay.
I can double check on that and clarify, but I think that, that's how I've always operated, but.
So we need an 8. Yes.
So technically you could pass something, but you'd have to have more of the people who were here vote yes.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
so just to be clear, there will still be opportunities to weigh in the legislative process at your next meeting. The governor will have not signed legislation. The legislative session will still be going on. So this isn't the last chance corral for any legislation. So don't feel like your voices can't still be heard and that you can even have more conversations about this. And I don't know what will change now between now and then either.
So now I'd like to make my comment. So let's go back to the original purpose of this conversation. So the original purpose of the conversation, yes, is to take a position on some things, but you, commissioners, are in a very unique position. And as we all know, we all take positions on bills in our day jobs. Your role on the commission, you have direct access to legislators. You have direct access to all of the appointing bodies, and they are seeking your input. So in some ways, yes, our position is really important, but our process for getting there is even more important. And the opportunity to inform the conversation is critical. So what I would love to have is more content or more detail about the discussion and what we should be sharing with our appointing bodies, which I, in many ways, think is more important than a yes, support, or oppose. We need to have context for them to be thinking through the legislation and ongoing conversations. And we have the opportunity to do that. And like Kristen just said, while yes, we can send a letter, we all know that that direct access that you have as commissioners is even more meaningful. So if we could get to the point, and we're out of time on this bill right now in this meeting, but I would love for us to get to the point that, yes, we may on ledge discussions get to the place that we want to take a position, but I don't want to minimize our ability to influence the conversation. Well, influence isn't the right word, but provide context based on your expertise. So I love that we are adding legislation to our agendas. I love that that is a priority. What that means, however, is that we need folks that are willing to put in the time to do the bill analysis before a meeting and be able to present the pros and cons on a bill to the commission, because it is unfair for us to be weighing in just on face value or just on the discussion that we're having here in the meeting. And while I know folks read the text of the bill and read the analysis and read the fact sheets ahead of time, I really appreciate that. We need more context for these conversations as well. So I would love to hear, as we think about, I mean, not even just our positions, I would love folks to be involved. I mean, Barbara and I, with Matt's input and the bills that are on this agenda came from discussions that happened at the Mental Health Subcommittee at the last meeting. And Matt was Matt, thank you, Matt, for spending the majority of his job researching the text for the information for these bills for this meeting, and even added these two. There were other bills on that original list, but they either were, one of them, a really big one, was in on the suspense file until this agenda got printed. So it got pulled off suspense at the last minute. But if we're going to get involved in legislation, which I highly recommend, I think it's an important role of the commission, we need some legwork, and we need more time put in up front so that we have more context when we have the conversations. Yes.
So I just want to also just mention that that this agenda is your agenda, And so because I came from this role with you, the CDE has no intention of controlling the agenda in any way. And so we're here as your facilitators, as your executive secretary, to meet your needs around what you want to talk about. So in this role that I'm sitting in here now as executive secretary, I am agnostic about what you want to talk about. We just want to make sure that you get it in the right context and have the right people talking to you so you get a full scope of information, which is the people that we bring in, you know, to your, whatever you request. The legislative piece of this is one that's been, that's gone through a lot of iterations over the years. And I was the legislative chair when I first started on the commission for a couple of years. And what it takes to look at all the bills, I think most of you know, just looking at one bill, it takes a lot of time. And so if, you know, the best case scenario, there's a leg committee who spends a considerable amount of time. And in the past, when there's been people who are really interested in it, they spent maybe a good 20 hours a week during leg session working on it. And then they brought all the pieces together to be able to present like a full scope of what was happening so that the commission could decide. They would meet regularly for 2 or 3 hours the night before the commission meeting. They would do background work on the side. It was a lot of work. So we're happy to help facilitate that to happen and provide you with some assistance on that. But I will tell you that it takes a lot of time. So if somebody's really interested and wants to commit to that, it is within the scope of your duties to be able to weigh in on legislation and talk to your legislative body. But as Gina said, it's highly beneficial to really get your legislators, both personally in your own districts and the ones that appointed you, give them a foundational understanding of what's happening in special ed and your belief system as a commission. That's why those pillars are so important, so that they can vote with that lens. And that when legislation like this comes up, they're already queued up to be paying attention to it from that direction. And you have some liaisons that are also assigned to you. And so those are ones also to reach out to if you have specific concerns about legislation. So it's good to always, you know, have your name out there and do support and oppose, but that's the end, kind of the end of the game. You have an opportunity to be part of the conversation, so I encourage you to do that.
Yes. So we are running, so let me just conclude that item by thanking you. And definitely in no way want to, what's the word for disencourage? Help. Discourage, thank you. Gosh. It's late in the day. I definitely do not want to discourage folks from bringing forward legislation. And in fact, I would love for folks to, the same process that happened last time. At the meeting, bills were suggested, and I would love help providing the analysis. Matt, like I said, did so much legwork, and that is not his role. It is our role if we're gonna be taking on legislation. So as you think about the agenda for the next meeting, think about if there are specific bills, we have to post ahead of time so the public is part of our process. But tracking and making sure the commission is fully prepared for the discussion, I would love help with.
And I think we did that when Christina really wanted to change it to 30, because the conversation was she wanted to say she didn't want parents to have to wait. She had reasons. We didn't just bring them up because it didn't even get a second. But I mean, I think we were doing what you wanted us to do, was not just say yes or no, but her reasoning was she just didn't think 45 days was necessary.
Yeah.
She felt they could get it done in 30 days if they had to, and that would be it. So I think we did that. We just didn't bring that part forward, and maybe we should have.
Right.
Thank you.
To clarify that, Barbara, though, I mean, my understanding, I'm no expert in Robert's Rules of Order, but I think that's where the discussion piece, if there's a motion and then there's a second, that means there's sufficient reasoning to bring something forward. And then in the discussion piece is where we should be bringing all those points of view out. And then you need to take a vote if it got a second. In this case, it didn't get a second, so it didn't go forward. But then that being said, the reasoning is that an alternate perspective was motioned and seconded and voted on. Unfortunately, it wasn't clear the numbers of people necessary. So maybe we shouldn't have even taken a vote. I'm not quite sure. Well, no, because it's possible it could have passed. That's right. So that's fine. So I think the process is right and in place for any of these issues so that people can bring them up as they choose or as they have a point of view. I'm learning that Roberts has a function.
And then I have one more question, and I know we have somebody in the back.
Yes.
So then if I wanted her, do we be able to explain why? I could have seconded, even if I wasn't going to vote for it, I could have seconded so she could have had her right to speak. So is that what I possibly did wrong is what I'm asking?
You could have, but it kind of signals that you support it.
Yeah.
So therefore, you can't ever find out why somebody wants something to happen. But if there aren't two, then you can't. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I.
That's a done deal.
There's no downside to it, really. I mean, but it
a
does sort
done
of
deal.
signal.
I'm always seconding. I got it.
All right. Thank you, commissioners. I do appreciate the conversation. We are going to go ahead and move on to item number 6. And I would love to invite Lisa Mierzinski and Aaron Heredia from the Department of Finance to come forward and tell us about the May budget revise and some follow-up from our last discussion, which was at the beginning of the stakeholder input process. So welcome.
So like I said, I'm Aaron Heredia. I've been on the special ed assignment for I think the last year or so at finance, and then I also work on the local control funding formula for school districts, charter schools, and county offices. So really, I mean, the presentation today is going to be very similar for those of you. I think I recognize pretty much everybody from last year when I did the presentation. So I'll just kind of do a quick overview of, our budget process, right? California's budget's developed over the better part of about 8 months from November, or really October, November, December. We get, requests from departments and we develop proposals of our own. And then we present what's called the governor's budget in January, usually January 10th, or lately it's been before that. Then that's kind of the first, our first estimates of the coming year. Folks, we deliberate with stakeholders and with the legislature, et cetera. And then there's the May revision, which just happened recently, which is our second take at the estimate for the next year with updated revenues, et cetera, updated average daily attendance, data from prior years for our projections, a lot of different things happening, new proposals. And then the governor, eventually after deliberations between us and the legislature and stakeholders, the governor signs the final budget, usually at the end of the month, the end of this month. So while it's titled the 1718 Budget Act, we realized after the fact that technically it's not yet because he hasn't signed it yet, but that's, regardless, that's the title. And then to go to just enter. There we go. So a little bit of background on Proposition 98, as a lot of you are probably familiar with, right? It was constitutional now, so it was passed in 1988, and it sets a minimum level of funding for K-14 education, and it has to grow year over year for changes in average daily attendance as well as inflation. It can be suspended to negate that year-over-year requirement, but it takes a 2/3 vote of the legislature, and any funding that would be missed out as a result of that has to be paid back in later years once it's available, and that's what's known as maintenance factor. And the amount in funding from state general fund is typically equal to 40% of the state's total available general fund. And right now, as you can see on the chart here, Prop 98's at an 11-year high for sure, by far, as the economy really has fortunately rebounded quite significantly. And we had a pretty decent surge in revenues, especially like 14, 15, 15, 16. I remember my first budget I worked on, we allocated almost $6 billion for the LCFF that year. So it was exciting times for sure the last few years to be able to finally have those increases. And then here's a graph of some per student funding over the last 3 years. So the shaded black is the Prop 98 amount, and of course, intuitively, as Prop 98 has increased and enrollment has stayed relatively flat, naturally the per pupil spending amount is going to increase. So you see in 17-18 just a little over $11,000, and you hear a lot about per pupil funding rankings and where California stands. I think I would just proactively point out, unfortunately, a lot of those studies are still kind of outdated. A lot of them that are oftentimes referenced are still from 2011, 2012, when we were really still coming out of the recession just barely, and they don't necessarily take into account the significant amount of increased funding under LCFF, particularly for students in California. And sometimes those studies don't look at all the different variables that are at play, like cost of living or just different funding sources, since every state funds their education obviously a little bit differently. So just some things to consider. It tends to be a hot topic when we talk about these kind of things. And so then, excuse me, here's a little just breakdown on spending within Prop 98. So obviously the administration, we still continue to prioritize fully funding LCFF with that's shown there, $58.3 billion. About $1 billion of that is going to be the county office, their funding formula, but the majority besides that obviously is for school districts and charter schools. Community colleges coming in around $8 billion, and you can see what special ed gets 3.8, and that's their state general fund share of their funding. They also have the federal funds, which we'll get to on the next slide. And like I said, the 98 guarantee increased just around $3 billion from last year, from 71.9 I think to the 74.5 here. And then moving on. So LCFF, we're proposing in this year's Budget Act over $1.3 billion of new funding, which builds on the already existing $15.7 billion that's been provided since the passage of LCFF. And as hopefully most of you are familiar with, right, we moved from LCFF in 13-14, or to LCFF, excuse me, from a system that under revenue limits and categorical funding that at least the administration viewed as very inflexible, restrictive, and we designed something in LCFF that gives school districts much more of an opportunity to engage their community, or at least an incentive to, and make sure that they're designing their programs and their budgets accordingly to those student needs and community needs. Schools get funding based on the different grade levels, and those base grants are adjusted for inflation every year, and so each LEA has a target LCFF amount that they're all going towards. And statewide, with the amount of so now with this additional 1.3 will be around $17 billion total of additional ongoing money since 13-14 that we've been able to allocate for LCFF. And as the bullet there says, when you look at our 13-14 projections of where we were going to be in 17-18, fortunately, we're actually almost $5 billion above that now with the money that we've been able to allocate towards LCFF implementation. And so that brings us up to about 97% now in 17-18. And moving on to special education. So the majority of funding, like I kind of mentioned on the other slide, is through Proposition 98, a $3.8 billion general fund, 1.2 in federal funds, and the lion's share of that is through the SPED, or excuse me, I don't know why I said that, but AB 602 formula, kind of the base allocation formula, right, that most of you are probably pretty familiar with. It's historical, been around quite a while, with kind of historical levels set, and then some adjustments made every year. But generally those amounts, like for mental health services, infants and toddlers, stay pretty consistent year to year, as those are really federally protected amounts that the state has to meet. And then federal funds as well, slight increase this year, but generally a pretty stable, consistent number every year with some small growth. And with that, I apologize if I went very fast through everything. But with that, I know it was a lot of information. I assume most of you are pretty familiar to this point with what I discussed, but we're more than happy to answer questions, special ed related, or LCFF, or Prop 98, if you have them. So, thank you. Sure.
Just, is this an increase as far as for special ed funding for this?
There is a slight increase, yes.
Last year too?
Yeah, from last year to now. Yeah, it doesn't round up to 3.8 to 3.9, but yes, there is an increase in the hundreds of millions from year to year. I don't know off the top of my head what it is, but there is an increase. Mostly just a cost of living adjustment. I think cost of living this year was 1.56%. So for the most part, that it's not huge, but yeah. So.
Aaron, thank you. That was fast. So I'm trying to digest. You did a really great job.
Process.
Yeah. It's hard because we're so deep in it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard to, yeah.
Sure, of course.
Okay, and I know I should know this, but are we saying that next year we will have $14,550 per student?
In total resources.
In total resources?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's in addition to Proposition 98 funding. That's what the
In
graph is.
addition to. In total.
Oh,
That's
right,
what
right.
I thought.
Sorry.
I thought the 11,000 is the 98. And the rest is, okay, that, I
There's
just
an
wanted to make
incremental
sure.
increase to get you up to, right, okay. Yeah, I
That's
see.
what I was just double checking.
Gotcha. That would be a lot. Take that, rankings.
I don't think I have a question. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
We did it so fast that we wanted to.
No, but it was very comprehensive. Yes, it's good news.
It is.
It's better than it was in governor's budget, that's for sure. We did have some revenue, but in total for the state, though, we're still $3 billion below revenue-wise than we were when we at budget act of last year. So the revenues picture is still not looking well, and cash receipts are still not coming in. And basically, what this budget act does entail is the agreement in conference through the legislature and the administration to over appropriate the minimum guarantee. Otherwise, these numbers would look quite a bit not as rosy. So we over appropriated by almost $350 million or so in 15-16. So in other words, the guarantee dropped. Normally, we would go back and reduce spending to match that. And it was agreed to over appropriate. And then again in 16-17, we're over appropriating the guarantee by about $480 million. So in total, and then the way the minimum guarantee works is those totals, you over appropriate the guarantee, you bring the guarantee level up, that higher level now carries forward into the out years. So had that not been done, you would have been seeing some spending reductions.
Okay, I do have a question.
That
That was close, right? I'm thinking back to Ian's last presentation to us, and I'm remembering a slide that had some increased preschool slots.
Yes, and so though, and I did not bring those, but yes.
That's okay.
There is, so at the governor's budget, you probably heard the pause, which didn't go over really well. But they did, so there was an agreement at last year's budget act. In 16-17, it was kind of a multi-year agreement.
Yes.
And so all of that agreement is included in this budget. And I want to say it's 2,500, 2,600 new slots. I probably
Okay.
should have a note on it.
Okay.
I think that's
And does that, is there crossover, I don't know the right word, what is the impact on special ed for those preschool slots?
So there was language in trailer bill, or there is language in trailer bill that, again, it's not my area, so well, special ed is my area, but this, I'm not too familiar with the language, but there was some language that kind of gave priority to special education kids, but I would have to get back with you exactly how that language works. I haven't looked at it in a while.
Okay. Oh, that'd be great.
There was something entered.
Okay, great. Thank you. Stephen?
I'm just trying to understand a little bit. Prop 98 spending this year, we're at 4.5 million. When you look at LCFF implementation is up to 97%.
Yes.
Does that mean that we are 1% of what the requirement is for Prop 98 in the spending?
We are one.
What is, I mean, Prop 98 is requiring,
Right, it sets the guarantee level.
right, and the guaranteed level is at what level?
74 point.
The 74.5.
Oh, it is the
That is the minimum guarantee. So we are funding at the minimum guarantee.
we're at the minimum right now based on Prop 98, okay.
17.8.
And then when you say the total LCFF implementation is up to 97%.
Right, so 98 is kind of, it existed, right, before LCFF. So that has its own calculation set out. And then LCFF, when it was passed in 13-14, has its own. And so the way that was structured is while everyone receives at least what they received in 12-13 and now with more because of what we call GAP or transition funding, since then, the 15.7 that I mentioned that's been allocated so far, that level is set, and doesn't have the same constitutional requirement. We haven't, reduced it at all, but we're marching towards that target. So the 97% is referring to a target that gets calculated every year.
Based on the LCFF, not.
Yes, it's an LCFF target.
That's what I was trying to.
Right. Yeah, to give you some context, like for 17-18, our projections, it's just around 60 billion would be 100% LCFF
I see.
Funded. So
The minimum guarantee is kind of like your pot of money that you have to spend. And it's based on revenues and COLAs and ADA and all these other factors. And that tells us how much we have to spend at the minimum. And then within that is LCFF. Then you have your priorities. So after we get all those priorities, we then determine how much gap we can afford to pay toward LCFF.
Yeah.
Their targets and goals.
Yeah, and then that target goes up with COLA and ADA.
Okay, thank you. That helped. Thanks.
I have another question. So in the last, in the revise, we saw language around special ed and discussions around special ed funding, and we were excited to see ongoing conversations about what that could look like. Could you give us an update on next steps or what you're thinking about those conversations?
We realized that it's a very large conversation and it's very complicated. So this summer is, Aaron, we were just discussing that back, it is one of our summer projects that we will be working on, looking further into the stuff that was started. And it kind of got put on hold. We had all the stakeholder group meetings. We got a lot of feedback. We do think that we need to open those discussions up a little bit more. They tended to be very similar and very similar groups. And there was a lot of groups missing and some discussions that just
I think of it as that we haven't necessarily formulated a specific plan yet in terms of exactly what those topics and the stakeholders are. I mean, we want to be inclusive, but I think based on the conversations that were had in the spring, we're still working on kind of structuring. I feel like I would envision another more structured approach to it again so that we can just kind of continue digging a little bit deeper. And now that we've done it once, kind of have a better idea of, what we're trying to get at and what's going to be the most constructive. So.
Great. No, that's great to hear. Commissioners, questions, thoughts, clarifications? So you clearly answered all of our questions and wowed us with your information. And I do appreciate you coming over, and I know we ran late, so I apologize for you having to wait. But thank you, and we'll look forward to engaging with you through the next steps in that process. Great, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, commissioners, we're moving along. We are on item 7, which is our liaison reports. And again, this is an opportunity for us to hear from our liaisons, as well as our commissioners that have liaison duties or roles in other groups or work groups or doing things related to their role as a commissioner. So maybe we'll start with Dr. Sandoval, who is our State Board of Education liaison.
Hey, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for your great service to serve students with disabilities and to serve all of our students in the state. You're doing very important work, and I'm always impressed by your dedication and your passion, and I love the dialogue, and to witness that is wonderful, so thank you. One thing I wanted to encourage you to do in between meetings is to check out the CDE website, the state board page, particularly the information memoranda. The audience is really the State Board of Education, but these memos are available for your viewing, and they're very informative to help you keep track of all these issues that are coming up simultaneously and to see where things are. So it's a great resource for me in between all of our meetings, and I encourage you to check that out. And they post things frequently, so that's a great resource. I also want to highlight, Carolyn had given you a flyer, a 2-pager on an early math symposium that's happening on June 23rd. It's sold out, that's my understanding, but you can participate virtually. So get your registration in. This is a wonderful resource for early education and mathematics learning. So great work with a lot of phenomenal partners involved in making that happen. Just a couple of highlights from our May State Board meeting. Just a couple of action items that I'll share with you. The SBE did approve the Fresno County Charter SELPA request, so I wanted to let you know about that. And then also we did approve some waivers to modify the extended school year for students with disabilities in 9 school districts. And I want to make the point that the conditions for modification are that the students receive the same amount of instructional time. So no one's being shorted in any way by those waivers. So I just wanted to share those highlights with you, and again, give thanks for all the work that you do and for just meeting year round without fail. It's fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sandoval, and thank you for commissioners. You made a motion and voted to support the Fresno Charter SELPA, and I want to thank you, Dr. Sandoval, for carrying that message and that letter to the State Board. Okay, commissioners, other updates and liaison reports from other things you may be doing. Barbara, would you like to go first?
Oh, mine's so exciting. I was with a group yesterday, and I will be the Monday again Tuesday before we have our meeting. We are working with Community of Practice on secondary education, and we are working on diplomas for all students. So the student will not have a certificate of completion. They will actually get a diploma. We're doing a lot of work on it. It's in, the beginning stages. We're working with other states and what's happening there. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're going to make some position papers ready. We are going to meet again in August, and then I'm asking as a liaison that in October, I would like the leads to be able to come and explain what we're doing and what kind of, are we coming up with the same diplomas? Are they going to be stackable diplomas, or what is it actually going to be? But I think you would all be very interested in hearing it. And then, of course, we'll have to carry it forward, and we would need your ideas if this is a good idea, it's a bad idea, because there's questions both ways. But we are working very hard, and we had 7 of us meet yesterday, and it was just invigorating. It was just invigorating because students with disabilities need a diploma to be able to check that box when they want a job so that their application isn't just thrown out. There are students who want to go to college and need financial, and they can't get it if they can't check that they did a diploma. It's going to be a hard sell for many because people are going to say, well, then you're just giving out diplomas to give out diplomas. But that isn't what we're looking for. The IEP, and maybe I'm going too far into depth, the IEP process, you write down an individualized plan of what you think the student needs to be able to get their diploma. So we would like to use that process. There's also ed code that talks about alternative education and the ways you can change it to give them a diploma with less hours and all sorts of things. There's CTEs that we could possibly use with some of our students with special, disabilities. There's so many ways that are already out there that we're not just saying to the state board, listen, this is what we want. We want you to give all of our kids diplomas. we are giving people diplomas who can't quite handle high school and come for shorter hours and get more online or more independent studies. So this is what our group is doing. And if any of you would like to talk to me about it, I would love to hear, because it's really a very, very exciting.
Very exciting. I'd love to add that to our October agenda.
I hope so. Thank you.
Mildred.
Next week, on the Wednesday, the 28th, the California Department of Ed is having the stakeholder group that Christian has mentioned. It's all in regards to the new regulations for significant disproportionality that came from the federal government, and this will be the first meeting. The first meeting is to discuss 3 areas, address reasonable risk ratio thresholds, minimum in size and cell sizes, as well as standards towards reasonable progress. Because if a district is deemed to be making reasonable progress, then they no longer will be considered significant disproportionate. So that will be the first meeting, and then there'll be other meetings which will talk about how districts would address their SACE plan as far as addressing disproportionality, completing root cause analysis, and the technical assistance that will be provided. I'm not sure if many of you know that Shiloh did do using the new regulations for OSEP, and I'm pretty sure there are over 800 districts that were determined to be disproportionate. So
and charters.
It's a very substantial number of districts based on the new legislation. So the work will not be to talk about disproportionality, but significant disproportionality. So this year, if in fact the new criteria was used, there would be about 300 districts that would be significant disproportionate. And this year, with the old criteria, it's only 24. So it's just showing you what a difference of an impact this is going to make in regards to districts. But it also brings forward the concern that has been echoed over and over, that there's not been a lot of conversation about significant disproportionality. So if we're looking at, and this is the over-identification of certain subgroups in special education. So we're hoping to be able to share feedback from this first meeting and the discussion. And it's going to be not just special educators attending, but parents and other stakeholders attending this meeting on the 28th.
Great. Well, I'm assuming that you will be there as well.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you. Summer.
I just wanted to thank again the assessment division of CDE that they include us for about once a month. We have a stakeholders group on the CASP assessment, all different kinds of assessments, but they bring in even the accountability department sometimes. And there just seems to be a nice conversation being built that we're at the table for. So I just want to thank them for that.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Summer. Yes, Christina.
Just want to remind everyone that the California Youth Leadership Forum for Students with Disabilities that we've supported historically will be happening during our next meeting, July 31st through August 4th here at CSUS. So I will not be in participation at the meeting. However, there have been some significant changes in the programming, and there will be I believe last YLF planning meeting next week. There are some new background requirements at Sac State that have made us have to jump through many new hoops that we're not used to, and meet some timelines with volunteer staff that have made it difficult. So if anything changes, I will let you know, but as of today, it will be on, so I will not be here during our next meeting. Thank you for supporting the forum.
Absolutely. Okay, other comments? And I know at the last meeting, Michelle updated us on the dyslexia work group, and I do believe we have them scheduled at the August meeting to do a presentation. So thank you for your work on that work group. Sure.
So I was fortunate to be accepted into a work group for the Department of Ed on AB 2785 to develop the manual for English learners with disabilities. So I will be hopefully reporting back. We have a webinar in July, so maybe in August I will have something to share.
Thank you for representing us on that group, Kayla. Okay, other updates? Okay, well, we are then moving into our last item, which is general public comment. Venetia, do we have any public commenters today? Okay. All righty, well then, commissioners, I give you 15 minutes into your schedule that you were not anticipating. So thank you for your engagement. You know, I do, as I think about these meetings a lot outside of the meetings, I continue to be impressed with the level of engagement and willingness to take a risk and provide really valuable information to our appointing bodies. So I thank you for the conversations. And I know that people are watching, people refer back to our videos, believe it or not. And thanks to Venetia, you're able to scroll through and you can click on an item to see the discussion by item number in the agenda. So I do appreciate the engagement. Have a fabulous evening, and we will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. All right, thank you.